Part 22. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 212. In Yaokai, the moonlight was hazy, the lotus swayed gently in the wind, and the leaves of the ancient Tiandan phoenix tree rustled. In the distance, several eyes were secretly peeking at this place. To be precise, they were staring at the fairy in the green skirt. They were not sure whether this fairy was the Qing emperor, and even thought that the other party was definitely not the Qing emperor. Although they had never seen the fairy figure of this female emperor in the past, they knew that it was impossible for the Qing emperor to kiss a junior in front of the Tiandan phoenix tree. The defense alert of Yaokai was lowered a lot tonight. If they wanted to destroy the Tiandan phoenix tree, this was a rare opportunity. But if the person in front of them was really the Qing emperor, even though the outside world rumored that the Qing emperor had just reshaped his immortal body and had not yet condensed the cauldron, it was still frightening. Could it be that he wanted to destroy the Tiandan phoenix tree in front of the Qing emperor? It was unrealistic. In the shadows, two of them looked at each other, then tacitly withdrew their gazes and turned away. They were all elders from the ancient family. Each of them hid their own aura and did not know each other, but their goal was the same, to destroy the Tiandan phoenix tree. But at this moment, when they saw the fairy in green skirt, they immediately wanted to retreat. If this woman was really the Green Emperor, there might be accidents if they acted rashly now. Although she did not emit any spiritual energy at the moment, it was this restrained aura that made people palpitate. Humph. At this time, the third old man snorted coldly and made a decisive move. His old and withered palm turned into a huge palm print, and he raised his hand to grab the direction of the Tiandan phoenix tree. In the cuffs, a white gold ball of light exuded a dangerous aura, quietly spreading in the area of the Tiandan phoenix tree. Ancestral weapon. The other two elders in the shadows were horrified. They did not expect that an ancient family would sacrifice the ancestral weapon of the clan in order to prevent the rebirth of the Green Emperor. However, the aura of the ancestral weapon was obviously covered up, because the true posture of the ancestral weapon was not revealed. This is also because the ancient family who took action was worried that Yaoqi Holy Land would retaliate without regard for the consequences in the future, so they deliberately concealed the original form of the ancestral weapon. The green skirt fairy looked calm, as bright and cold as frost and snow, and did not make any movements. Boom! The ancestral weapon hit the formation on the surface of the Tiandan phoenix tree, and a deafening sound resounded, and the silence in Yaoqi Holy Land was completely broken. Are you crazy? If we alarm the rest of the people in Yaoqi, how can we leave tonight? In the shadows, an elder of the ancient family shouted in a low voice. If you anger the Green Emperor, you and I will have to explain it here. Let's not talk about whether that woman is the Green Emperor. Even if she is, what? The female emperor without the cauldron is not as good as a junior in the Qi training realm, the old man sneered. He held the ancestral weapon and thought he was sure to retreat unscathed, so he was naturally not afraid at this moment. As for the life and death of others, if you dare to sneak in at this time, you must be prepared to die. The old man once again sacrificed the ancestral weapon and blasted towards the direction of the Tiandan phoenix tree. He never attacked the two people standing under the Tiandan phoenix tree, because his goal was very clear from the beginning, that is, to destroy the Tiandan phoenix tree, or to delay its fruiting time for a few years. However, when the ancestral weapon was sacrificed again, the fairy in green skirt sighed softly. Musian could clearly feel that there seemed to be an extremely terrifying pressure spreading quietly with the fairy in green skirt as the center. The two elders hiding in the shadows were horrified. They had planned to see the situation, but when they felt this pressure at this moment, they turned around and fled without any hesitation. The breath that can scare the Return to Void cultivators can only be done by those above the 7th rank of Return to Void. There is a huge gap between the 7th rank of Return to Void and those below the 7th rank of Return to Void. After the 7th rank, as long as one can comprehend a trace of the Great Dao, it is not something that other return to void realms can resist. Even if this woman is not the Green Emperor, she is at least a return to void 7th rank who has comprehended the great Dao. At this time, Musian suddenly heard a surprised and angry voice from the shadows. He turned his head and saw a green vine quietly entwined between the two elders who had just hidden in the shadows. Then, the surface of the vine seemed to be filled with soft green light, illuminating the yokai. The two elders roared in fear, and found that the spiritual energy in their bodies was being absorbed by this strange vine. Moreover, their cauldrons were difficult to operate, and the spiritual energy was completely restricted. Almost in the blink of an eye, the two were silent. They were swallowed by the green vines, and the cauldrons in their bodies were transformed into spiritual energy, and completely disappeared between heaven and earth. The last old man holding the ancestral artifact was horrified and terrified. He stared at the fairy in the green skirt and said, "Are you the Green Emperor?" It is rumored that the Green Emperor only showed 2 moves in front of the world, and these 2 moves alone suppressed all enemies. This mysterious vine is one of them. Obviously, this woman is really the Green Emperor. And unlike the rumors, she can actually use spiritual energy. But if that's the case, it still doesn't make sense. At this moment, the old man holding the ancestral artifact had a glimmer of fear in his eyes, and said, "No. If it was the Green Emperor, how could he kiss a little cultivator?" Before he finished speaking, the old man's voice stagnated, and the vine suddenly bound him, and then, with a hiss, his cauldron collapsed in an instant, and the ancestral artifact in his hand quietly turned into particles and disappeared between heaven and earth. The 3 returned to void elders from the ancient family all died in an instant. Musian looked at the scene and the green vines that quietly drilled into the ground. He seemed indifferent, but his scalp was numb. The magical power of this fairy in green skirt was too terrifying. 3 elders in the return to void realm were suppressed by her so easily. And this was before she condensed the cauldron. What on earth was that vine that could directly absorb the spiritual energy of others? If she wanted, wouldn't she be able to use it to absorb my spiritual energy? The Empress of the Hedeo realm was really powerful. After watching the scene for an unknown period of time, Musian suppressed his inner throbbing and suddenly said, "Is that the ancestral weapon in his hand just now?" He remembered the weapon in the hand of one of the old men just now. The aura emitted by the weapon was much more threatening than any weapon he had seen before. Fairy Kinkan shook her head gently and said, "It is an ancestral artifact, but not a real one. It is just a projection made using the ancestral artifact, and its power is not as strong as the real one. They are willing to sacrifice the ancestral artifact to stop your rebirth. It seems that these people are really trying their best," Musian said. Ancestral artifacts are not possessed by every ancient family. In Dongzhou, among hundreds of ancient families, there may be only about 10 who can possess ancestral artifacts. At present, there are ancient families who are willing to sacrifice ancestral artifacts to destroy the Tiandan Phoenix tree. Obviously, they do not want the Green Emperor to be resurrected. Fairy Kinkan just looked at Musian deeply and said softly, "There are quite a few people who want to stop me." Musian was slightly relieved. That's right, after all, some people probably don't want to see the rebirth of a female emperor. But now, the rebirth of the Green Emperor is almost a foregone conclusion. If Musian is not here, Yaokai Holy Land may indeed have some troubles this time. After all, the old man just sacrificed was not the real ancestral weapon. If it was a real ancestral weapon, the power that it burst out alone would not be something that Fangsu could resist. The ancestral weapon is a weapon made by a strong man in the Hedeo realm. Although it cannot exert its true power in the hands of ordinary cultivators, it also contains extremely terrifying power. However, the old man just faced the Green Emperor. Even if the real ancestral weapon was sacrificed, it would be useless. If the Green Emperor wanted, he could even guard the Tiandan Phoenix tree until it bore fruit. The premise is that there is enough spiritual energy. The green skirt fairy looked at her palm and sighed. After only using the technique once, the spiritual energy that had just been absorbed from Musian disappeared completely. In the final analysis, Musian's realm was too low. If he was in the Fangxi realm now, she could purify more spiritual energy at a time. Let's go back first, the green skirt fairy said. Because of the attack tonight, she also lost the interest in relaxing. Don't we need to stay near the Tiandan Phoenix tree? Musian asked. If the Tiandan Phoenix tree is destroyed, the consequences will be disastrous. No need, I have planted vine seeds near it. If someone attacks the phoenix tree, the seeds will counter-attack the enemy. Fairy Kinkan shook her head. At least there is no need to worry for the next 2 days, she continued. Fairy sister, the vine seems to be able to absorb the spiritual energy of others, Musian asked. It just converts the other party's spiritual energy into the spiritual energy between heaven and earth, but it doesn't have much effect on your natural furnace. When Fairy Kinkan said this, she looked at Musian's gorgeous green eyes, which seemed to be meaningful. After I go back this time, I will guide the spiritual energy of your natural furnace, so that at least my spiritual energy can be maintained until the Tiandan Phoenix tree bears fruit. How to guide? Musian asked tentatively, secretly peeking at Fairy Kinkan's face. It's just a pity that he can't see the other party's appearance until now, and can only vaguely see a flawless fairy face. Fairy Kinkan glanced at him quietly and said softly, go back first. For some reason, her usual cold autumn eyes seemed to reveal a trace of shyness that had never been there before, which disappeared in an instant. For some reason, Musian began to guess something in his heart. After following Fairy Kinkan back to the palace, the atmosphere between the two seemed a little awkward. Evidently, the atmosphere between them was quite normal before they went out, but for some reason, they didn't talk much since they entered the palace. Fairy, you have seen the Tiandan Phoenix tree tonight, you should also know when it will bear fruit. Musian finally took the initiative to speak and broke the silence. Fairy Kinkan nodded slightly. The heavenly Dan Phoenix tree may bear fruit in half a month. The fastest may be 10 days later. The fairy in the green skirt sat sideways on the soft couch, her full chest proudly supporting her clothes, her slender jade legs hidden under her green skirt, her delicate white jade feet lightly stepping on embroidered shoes, like a fairy in the sky, unattainable. She wore an emerald green double-breasted small dress, a plum light green skirt, a beautiful appearance that could make fish sink to the bottom of the water and geese fall to the ground, and her cherry-like red lips, which made people want to take a bite and taste the deliciousness. However, the aura exuded by the Green Emperor at this time was enough to make everyone who saw her feel awe from the bottom of their hearts, not to mention any bold ideas. Even LSPS like Musian felt a lot of pressure at this moment. Even though the Green Emperor restrained his aura, his natural spirit body had disadvantages at this time. At least when he was alone with the Green Emperor, Musian could clearly sense the aura emanating from her. The aura emanating from this female emperor at this time was a little difficult for Musian to control. Musian gathered his thoughts a little, stood up and walked to the table to pour himself a cup of tea, took a sip, and calmed down. The Hedeo realm is the Hedeo realm after all. Even if the cauldron is not reshaped, this aura is so amazing. If the cauldron is reshaped in the future and returns to the Hedeo realm, her aura may be even more terrifying. This female emperor is really not that easy to control. When Musian thought of this, he suddenly noticed a gaze, raised his head and looked over, and happened to see the green skirt fairy who was silently staring at him. What's wrong? Musian asked. Just now I said that you have to guide the spiritual energy in your natural furnace, the green skirt fairy suddenly spoke. Musian nodded slightly. Fairy, please speak. I will try my best to cooperate with you. You don't have to do anything, the fairy in green skirt said. Then, she stood up, pretending to be nonchalant, and walked slowly under Musian's gaze. It must be said that although this fairy has a cold attitude, she is the most likely to attract men's love. At least at this moment, Musian's eyes never moved away from her from beginning to end, just staring at the fairy in green skirt coming to him. She raised her hand, placed it on Musian's face, and whispered, "After the guidance, your natural furnace may have a recovery period of about half a month. Have you thought it through? Half a month of recovery period, does this mean that all the spiritual energy in the natural furnace is taken away? The spiritual energy in the Tiansheng furnace is actually obtained from the outside world, but the spiritual energy purification speed of the Tiansheng furnace is countless times faster than that of Musian's other furnace. Even if Musian helped Bairuoxi day and night in the past, the spiritual energy of the Tiansheng furnace has never been completely absorbed. It should be said that it is worthy of being in the Hedeo realm. It is not so easy to satisfy." Musian nodded slightly. "For the fairy sister, everything is worth it." The fairy in the green skirt stared at Musian silently, and her autumn-like eyes reflected Musian's figure. She opened her red lips slightly, and her voice was as crisp as the collision of jade, and like a fairy sound, which was irresistible. "Close your eyes. This is the blessing brought by the Tao of the fairy in the green skirt." Her voice naturally makes people feel good, and for people with low realms, it is even more difficult to resist her words. Moreover, even without this Tao, the words of a female emperor in the Hedeo realm alone cannot be disobeyed. So, Musian closed his eyes obediently. When he felt the breath mixed with a faint fragrance drifting into his nose, he quietly opened his eyes. The flawless face of the Empress was already within reach, with thick and curled eyelashes that blinked slightly, and the pair of green eyes under the eyelashes that seemed not to belong to the mortal world were crystal clear, as if there was no pollution at all. Seeing Musian suddenly open his eyes, the eyes of the fairy in the green skirt flickered slightly, and Musian saw for the first time a faint blush on her face, which was somewhat charming against the silver light. Close your eyes." She opened her red lips and spoke again. However, this time, Musian did not close his eyes obediently. Under the surprised eyes of the fairy in the green skirt, one hand was placed on her slender waist outlined by the thin ribbon. With a strong embrace, he hugged the delicate and soft figure of the fairy in the green skirt tightly in his arms. "Close your eyes." Musian lowered his head and stared at her flawless face, changed his offensive, and said softly. Fairy Kinkan was slightly stunned, raised her eyes and looked at him, with a hint of doubt between her eyebrows. A young cultivator in the realm of refining spirits, let her close her eyes? However, after looking at Musian's eyes for an unknown period of time, Fairy Kinkan still quietly closed her eyes. Just to see what kind of outrageous actions this young cultivator in the realm of refining spirits dared to do. Musian bent down slightly, put one hand on Fairy Kinkan's knees, and carried Fairy Kinkan's soft body horizontally in a princess hug, and walked to the brocade couch not far from the table. Then, Musian turned around, extinguished the candle with a flick of his finger, and then drew the curtain. "Today, let you see what it means to suppress the Hedeo Empress with a body of refining spirits." Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 213. The news that 3 returned to Void Realm elders sneaked into Yaoqi Holy Land tonight and were defeated instantly spread in Shenhuang City almost that night. This news undoubtedly set off a storm in Shenhuang City. Whether in the tea house or the inn, the cultivators from all over Dongzhou were discussing this matter at this moment. The loss of 3 returned to Void Realm elders at once. I'm afraid the heart of this ancient family is bleeding. Someone couldn't help but sigh. It may not be from the same ancient family. Maybe 2 or even 3 elders from the ancient family secretly took action, a cultivator next to him guessed. After all, even if it is an ancient family, it is good to have 3 or 4 return to Void Realm elders. Which ancient family would be willing to spend so much money to directly send 3 return to Void Realm elders to secretly test Yaoqi Holy Land? By the way, how did you know that an ancient family sent people to test Yao Qi? Is it all speculation? Suddenly someone couldn't help but ask. Do we need to guess? Last night, there was suddenly a surge of spiritual energy above Yao Qi Holy Land, filling the sky and the earth. It is obvious that it is the spiritual energy that can only be emitted by the cultivators of Return to Void Realm. This Yao Qi Holy Land is really decisive. It seems that it should have directly sacrificed the pure world seed that the Green Emperor once left behind to suppress the three Return to Void. Legend has it that the pure world seed can turn into vines and absorb the spiritual energy of others. Once entangled, there is no possibility of escaping. The Green Emperor is really a female emperor of a generation some people can't help but sigh from the bottom of their hearts. It seems that the Green Emperor should have really returned to Yao Qi, and he was seriously injured, otherwise the Yao Qi Holy Land would not be so decisive and want to kill the chicken to scare the monkey. Many people believe that Yao Qi is likely to sacrifice the seeds that the Green Emperor once left behind, which is why it can suppress the three elders of Return to Void Realm so easily. After all, when the Green Emperor is seriously injured, he must practice in seclusion and wait for the Tiandan Phoenix tree to bear fruit. During this period, Yao Qi will definitely find ways to protect the Green Emperor. There are still several ancient families who have not made a move. Tonight is probably just a test. Someone else followed suit, smelling the smell of the coming storm. The name of the Green Emperor is the most beautiful in the world. If possible, I hope that the Green Emperor can be reborn and see her supreme style again. Hey, do you want to see her style or her appearance? A cultivator next to him couldn't help but expose it. For the Green Emperor, it is absolutely impossible to say that there is no idea, but her strength is daunting, so even those who secretly admire the Green Emperor can only hide this admiration in their hearts. Whether you can see her style depends on whether the Tiandan Phoenix tree can hold on to the last success and be successfully refined by her. Since several ancient families have made a move in secret, they are ready to fight to the death with the Yaokai Holy Land. After tonight's test, there will probably be a more fierce attack tomorrow. Whether Yaokai can resist these attacks, countless people are watching now. The Qing Emperor's pure world seeds must have been used up tonight. If another ancient family secretly takes action tomorrow, or even sacrifices the ancestral artifact, it should not be difficult to affect the speed of its fruiting, not to mention destroying the heavenly Dan Phoenix tree. Yes, unless the Yao Qi Holy Land still has pure world seeds, there is only one way, which is to sacrifice the ancestral artifact. For a while, everyone in the tea house started to discuss. Some people hope that the Qing Emperor can reunite with the furnace to admire the supreme appearance of the fairy, and some people do not hope that she can return to the peak, but more cultivators are just watching. Until suddenly a slightly abrupt voice came. Do you think there is a possibility that it was not the Yao Qi Holy Land that made the move, but the Qing Emperor? The voices chatting in the tea house suddenly became silent, and there was no sound. Humph. At this time, an old man snorted coldly and said, "Fool, if the Green Emperor could really take action, would Yao Qi need to be so vigilant in front of him, send a large number of people, and even activate the formation to protect the Tiandan Phoenix tree?" The people gathered in the Holy King City had some power to a greater or lesser extent. The old man scolded others like this, which naturally made the cultivator who had just made this guess a little unhappy. When he turned his head and looked, the displeasure in his heart was immediately restrained. The guest of the Wang family of Dongzhou, Wang Meng. The Wang family of Dongzhou is one of the top existences even among the hundreds of forces in Dongzhou. Although it is not as big as the Forbidden Area, you must know that the Forbidden Area has never communicated with the outside world, and the Lianji sect is the most sacred place in Dongzhou and has always remained neutral. If the Forbidden Area does not leave and the Lianji sect also remains neutral, the Wang family of Dongzhou will be the top force. Next to Wang Meng, a charming woman in a low-cut red dress was playing with a strand of hair, her brightly painted red lips slightly pursed, and she chuckled, "Don't you think about it, If the Green Emperor can take action, do you need to secretly return to the Holy Land of Yaokai? The jewel in the crown of the Wang family, Wang Ying. I didn't expect that even the Wang family would come. Many cultivators' eyes moved slightly, reading some dangerous atmosphere. It seems that the Green Emperor's incident this time really alarmed all the forces in Dongzhou. After a while of silence in the tea house, the chattering gradually sounded again in the tea house. Many people present knew that the secret attack on Yaokai by some ancient families tonight was probably just the beginning. Tonight, the Holy Land of Yaokai seemed to have directly sacrificed the pure world seed to suppress the three land immortals. But what about tomorrow? Could it be that the world-purifying seed left behind by the Qing Emperor can be used until the heavenly pill phoenix tree bears fruit? I also know that this is not very realistic. No matter the casual cultivators in the tea house or even these ancient aristocratic families, they obviously would not have thought that the person taking action tonight was not the Yaokai Holy Land, but King Di himself. Today's Qing Emperor indeed has no spiritual energy, but Muzian Yaokai Holy Land. The Queen Mother of Yaokai leaned in front of the throne, quietly listening to what her subordinates had just reported about what happened in the Tiandan Phoenix Tree area. Tonight, 3 elders from ancient families took action. One of them even held an ancestral artifact projection, but they were suppressed by Senior King Di alone. Queen Mother of Yaokai tapped the edge of the chair with her fingertips, with a look of surprise on her face. Although we know the strength of the Empress, we must know that the current Empress cauldron has not yet condensed, but she can suppress 3 people in the moment of fighting. It is really shocking. Yes, and Muzian was also present at the time, the informant whispered. The Saint of Yaokai was wearing a thin white dress, and her body already had a silver glow similar to that of the fairy in the green dress. She stared at the secret agent and said, all 3 of them were absorbed by the vines of Senior Qing Emperor and completely disappeared. Seeing the spy nodding again, the Yaokai Saint's eyes became a little more thoughtful. There's something not right about this. It stands to reason that the current Qing Emperor should not have a cauldron. How on earth did he do it? The Queen Mother of Yaokai also looked thoughtful, and then quickly came to her senses. She gently raised her hand to signal the secret agent to step aside for now. Then, she took out a jade bottle from her sleeves, raised her hand gently, and the jade bottle flew lightly towards the Saint of Yaokai. Yao Yu, please send this elixir to Senior Qing Emperor. She looked at the Yaokai Saint who caught the jade bottle and said. The Saint of Yaokai opened the bottle, then raised her head in surprise and glanced at this beautiful woman as plump as a begonia flower, and said, Spirit Nurturing Pill. The 8th grade elixir, the Soul Nourishing Pill, has the same effect as the Soul Nourishing Pill. Even the Qing Emperor who has not yet entered the cauldron can still get some spiritual energy from the Soul Nourishing Pill. Isn't this what the Queen Mother originally planned to use to attack the realm of enlightenment? Saintess Yaokai asked subconsciously. The beautiful woman in thin clothes shook her head gently, with a gentle smile on her face, and said, now that the rules of the world have changed, I have tried, but it is difficult to take another step forward anyway. The state of enlightenment does not rely on qi. You may be able to step in through luck or hard work, and you have to wait for the rules of heaven and earth to allow it. The spiritual nourishing pill is of no use to me for the time being. Besides, the top priority now is Senior King Di. All other matters can be postponed later. The Saint of Yaokai carefully collected the spirit nourishing pill, then nodded slightly and said, I will go find Senior Qing Emperor right away. King Di's physical condition is very wrong. Logically speaking, she should have no spiritual energy, but she was able to suppress 3 land gods tonight. This is very wrong. According to the speculation of the Yaokai Saint, it is very likely that Qing Emperor used some secret method, but if this continues, it may affect Qing Emperor's future efforts to reshape the furnace. And this spiritual nourishing pill can give King Di a certain amount of spiritual energy, although it is a bit wasteful, he can't care about that much at the moment. Even these ancient aristocratic families could not obtain a few of the 8th grade elixirs. Firstly, it is because there are very few 8th grade alchemy masters, and secondly, among the medicinal materials required for 8th grade elixirs, 2 to 3 emperor level medicinal materials will definitely be needed. As for this emperor level medicinal material, it takes tens of thousands of years of evolution to form just 1 or 2 strains, which is very rare. The Queen Mother of Yaokai paid a huge price for Qing Emperor this time. I just hope everything goes well. The Saint of Yaokai took the jade bottle and walked towards the palace where Qing Emperor was. In the bedroom, the candle light had long been extinguished, and the room with sandalwood burning seemed quite ambiguous. The Qing Emperor was wearing a green double-breasted coat tonight. His slim and alluring figure was hidden in this double-breasted coat, but he could not hide his cold and fairy aura. There was a ribbon tied around his waist, outlining his plump and straight breasts and breasts. Slender waist. Wearing a long cyan skirt on her lower body, her legs were slender and well proportioned. In the dim light, there seemed to be 2 faint blushes on her flawless face, which was delicious. Tonight the fairy took action to suppress the 3 of them, but probably no one would guess that it was you who took action. Someone else might attack tomorrow. Musian sat on the bedside, discussing with Fairy Kinkin seriously. In fact, his eyes never moved away from the Kinkin fairy from the beginning to the end. He glanced back and forth from top to bottom and from bottom to top several times. She deserves to be called a fairy. Every inch of her skin is white and crystal clear, with no flaws visible. At this time, her legs are slightly bent, her calves are crossed and she is sitting on the brocade platform with one leg, which makes Musian wander around like this all year round. A veteran among flowers, I don't know where to start. Come on, just take this opportunity to see how many potential enemies there are in Yaokai. Fairy Kinkin looked calm and her fairy voice lingered. Although her tone was plain, people could feel the emotion in her words. Confidence. Musian nodded slightly. With the fairy's strength, it is not difficult to suppress foreign enemies. After finishing speaking, he continued, but there seems to be a premise. The night wind blew by, blowing the curtains covering the brocade collapse, and vaguely revealing the flawless appearance of the fairy in the green skirt. The atmosphere in the room suddenly seemed a little more ambiguous. The fairy in green skirt suddenly stopped talking, because she noticed that Musian's right hand covered the back of her hand, and then quietly clenched it. She raised her eyes slightly, just in time to see Musian's burning eyes staring at her. Before the cauldron was reshaped, the premise of suppressing the enemy was spiritual energy. And now spiritual energy can only be obtained from the outside world and under certain conditions. The fairy in green skirt knew what to do, and Musian naturally knew it as well. The Empress's originally calm expression suddenly seemed a little uncomfortable, so that after looking at Musian for less than a few seconds, she turned her face away involuntarily. Her face seemed to be slightly red, and her crystal clear earlobes seemed to be slightly hot. This posture was in sharp contrast to the fairy posture that was not stained with the world before, and it also made Musian gradually unable to hold back. He was bold and slowly approached, kissed her delicate fairy face, and then slowly moved down along her jade neck. Seeing that she did not stop him, Musian finally felt relieved. He hugged her slender waist and pulled the quilt to cover all the beauty. The Saint of Yaoqi walked in the quiet bedroom and looked around. When the Green Emperor came to the bedroom, he dismissed all the maids in the bedroom, leaving only her and Musian. However, when the Saint of Yaoqi just stepped into the bedroom, she felt something was wrong. It was too quiet. It was so quiet that she even thought that Musian and the Green Emperor had left the bedroom. At this time, the Saint of Yaoqi suddenly heard a faint sound coming from behind the hall. Her eyes moved slightly, and she walked towards the small garden behind the hall. Her sight quickly fixed on a certain elegant room. When she was about to approach the elegant room, suddenly a fairy sound like the sound of nature came from the elegant room. "What do you want?" But for some reason, the fairy sound seemed to reveal a lazy charm that had never been there before. The saint of Yaokai hesitated a little, but quickly gathered her thoughts and said respectfully, "The Queen Mother ordered me to send a Yangling pill to heal Senior Kingdom. Can I come in now? Wait in the side hall first. I am still in seclusion, no, I can't be disturbed." The fairy in the green skirt stared at the boy in her arms with blurred eyes, and her green jade fingers passed across his face. Her eyes were rippling with a touch of emotion, and her red lips opened slightly and said, "It will be fine in a while. Warm Ti. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 214. The way and process of giving spiritual energy are quite boring. However, Musian is a person who can endure boredom, and he even enjoys it. Unconsciously, an hour has passed. Musian's mental state still looks full, hugging the smooth and soft body of the green skirt fairy, looking bored. And the green skirt fairy in Musian's arms, with her cheek close to his chest, slightly closed her eyes, seemed to feel the gain brought by the spiritual energy just obtained from the natural furnace. It seems that because of the nourishment of spiritual energy, her flawless face is healthy and rosy, and a few strands of messy hair are placed on her delicate face. Compared with the usual coldness, the green skirt fairy at this time seems to be more charming. She opened her eyes silently and stared at the boy in front of her quietly. Even the existence of the green skirt fairy was a little surprised at this time. Although she had known for a long time that there were many good things in Musian's natural furnace, she was still somewhat surprised after feeling it so clearly. Natural furnace, even if you look at the entire world of immortals, such a physique is extremely rare. Of course, rare does not mean that there is no. The size of Juzhu is beyond the imagination of many cultivators. There are still many physiques that have not been recorded in some ancient books in this world. However, most people may not be able to leave Dongzhou in their entire lives, so naturally they cannot fully understand it. However, even if there are people with the same physique as Musian, it is impossible for them to have such an exaggerated natural furnace like him. As the most direct experiencer, Fairy Kinkan can clearly feel the increase of Musian's spiritual energy. This spiritual energy obtained from Musian is also mixed with a trace of the luck given to her by the Qi of heaven. In addition, there is also part of the spiritual energy of the reincarnated queen in one of her lives, and the spiritual energy that strengthens her own physique. Moreover, the spiritual energy that Musian's cauldron can give to others is also amazing. All the opportunities he got actually strengthened the natural furnace. Fairy Kinkan felt the spiritual energy in her body, and she looked at Musian with eyes that didn't know whether to sympathize or what. When Fairy Kinkan was thinking about such things, Musian's thoughts were completely different from Fairy Kinkan. He was a very simple person, without so many thoughts, just simply wanted to make his due contribution to Fairy Kinkan, and it would be good if he could help her, that's all. Feeling the beauty of the beauty in his arms, at this time, Musian suddenly felt that it seemed that a message was silently drilling into his spiritual consciousness. Musian subconsciously wanted to resist, but at this time, Fairy Kinkan's crisp and pleasant voice came to his ears, "Relax a little, it should be the natural Taoist fetus that gave you the heavenly grade technique. Every saint in Yaokai Holy Land is a natural Taoist fetus. When practicing with a person with a natural Taoist fetus, you can get a heavenly grade technique that best suits you." Obviously, after the dual cultivation just ended, the blessing brought by the natural Taoist fetus was immediately reflected. Upon hearing this, Musian immediately relaxed his spiritual consciousness, and then felt the amount of information like a tide pouring into his spiritual consciousness. 8 Desolate Dream Map. An emotionless voice sounded in his mind, and then the moves of the technique appeared in Musian's mind. It seems that this technique is not to strengthen the natural furnace. Musian was quite relieved. While feeling the delicate body of the fairy in his arms, he closed his eyes and savored the heavenly technique he had just obtained. The 8 Desolate Dream Map is actually similar to the Dongtian after returning to the Void Realm. After it is used, it will present a picture of the 8 desolate mountains and rivers, and put others into the 8 Desolate Dream Map. And in this 8 Desolate Dream Map, people will continue to dream. The dream they have is determined by the person who performs this technique. This ability is a bit against the sky. Musian whispered to himself in his heart. If he encounters someone whose realm is higher than his, the 8 Desolate Dream Map can temporarily collect him, and he can take this opportunity to escape. As for people whose realm is similar to his or even lower than his, then the other party will have to suffer. It should be said that this technique is indeed worthy of being a natural Taoist fetus. Moreover, this technique is not top level at present. In the future, after practicing with the Green Emperor for a period of time, the technique will surely be nurtured or even evolved through her natural Taoist fetus. When Musian was thinking about such things, the green skirt fairy suddenly whispered, "This natural furnace is really interesting. There is a furnace of the return to void realm in the refining spirit realm. If you step into the enlightenment realm in the future, maybe the cultivators of the combined Dao realm can also have a considerable benefit." She can feel the spiritual energy in her body at this moment, which she just got from the natural furnace. Although the Green Emperor has not yet condensed the furnace, she can squander this spiritual energy directly without going through the furnace. This is something that only the natural furnace can do. Musian came back to his senses a little, staring at the delicate face of the fairy in green skirt, and said, "Fairy, have you never seen a cultivator in the enlightenment realm with a natural furnace cauldron physique in the past?" The fairy in green skirt shook her head slowly. "The physique of a natural furnace cauldron is special. Let alone cultivating to the enlightenment realm, even if it is a spiritual realm, I have only seen you so far. What's more, a natural furnace cauldron as special as Musian is basically unique. If I advance to the enlightenment realm in the future, I will definitely assist the fairy with all my strength." Musian looked affectionate and hugged her tighter. However, the fairy in green skirt just smiled at Musian and said softly, "It doesn't necessarily need the future." There seemed to be a hint of depth in those green eyes. Musian was stunned for a moment. "Your current natural furnace has no effect on my practice, but it allows me to use my own skills for a short time, which is enough," the fairy in green skirt continued. "However, the spiritual energy of the return to void realm is still too little after all. Just once is far from enough." At the end, she looked at Musian gently. "So what does the fairy mean?" For some reason, Musian suddenly felt something was wrong in his heart. "When you mentioned the plan to suppress the foreign enemies, I told you, didn't I?" The fairy in green skirt gently raised her white hands and placed them on Musian's face. When she spoke, she seemed to exhale a faint fragrance from her sandalwood mouth, which made people feel intoxicated. "You must take responsibility and implement this plan to the end." The vines appeared silently on the edge of the brocade bed. Musian glanced at the vines quietly wrapped around his hands, and then looked at the fairy in green skirt in his arms. At this time, her eyebrows and eyes were smiling, and her rosy lips outlined a faint arc from the outside. She didn't look like the cold and unapproachable attitude before, but for some reason, her clear and bright green eyes seemed to have a little more dangerous luster. Musian fell into deep thought. Before, even when he was intimate with the fairy in green skirt, he still thought that he had made a lot of money tonight and that the fairy in green skirt had been fooled. But until now, when he saw the teasing in the eyes of the Empress, he suddenly realized something very serious. "It seems that I am the one who was fooled." Time passed silently, and before I knew it, it was the second half of the night. Musian lay on the bed, looking at the tall beam, thinking about life. For the first time since he was born, Musian felt what it felt like to have no spiritual energy in the natural furnace. He was not tired. After all, the Tao of his spiritual realm was to strengthen his physique, and he could recover within a day no matter how tired he was. However, Musian never expected that his natural furnace would dry up one day. "Are you tired?" the fairy in the green skirt gazed at Musian with her eyes. The light dress had already covered her graceful figure, and her temperament seemed to have returned to the previous state, as if she was standing in the sky, not eating the fireworks of the world. However, there were still 2 faint blushes on her face, which was very cute. Musian shook his head slowly, glanced at the fairy in front of him, and smiled, "Not tired, just a little surprised. I thought the fairy in the green skirt was a passive type, but I didn't expect." "Well, I can only say that it is extremely correct to judge a person by his appearance. After all, no one would have thought that this fairy in the green skirt would have such a charming posture when being intimate with the opposite sex." He stood up, then grabbed one of the hands of the fairy in the green skirt, and gently pulled the fairy in his arms. "Is the spiritual energy enough now?" Musian leaned over and whispered in her ear. "It's probably enough. After that, just replenish it every few days until the Tiandan phoenix tree bears fruit," the fairy in the green skirt said. Although her tone was calm, whether it was because of Musian's warm breath gently falling on her cheek or something else, the side face of the fairy in the green skirt was still stained with a faint blush. Although he had just felt bored, Musian was slightly moved when he saw the green skirt fairy's posture. He held the green skirt fairy's soft and slender waist with one hand, slowly moved forward, and kissed the beautiful woman's delicate white face in his arms. However, when he kissed her, Musian suddenly paused, as if he had noticed something, and subconsciously turned his head to look in a certain direction outside the window. He could feel that in that direction, it seemed that spiritual energy was constantly gathering together and then surging. The green skirt fairy raised her face, which was still slightly flushed, and looked into the distance. After a brief gaze, she whispered to herself, "Miscalculated." This vast spiritual energy was coming towards Musian. Long ago, Fairy Kinkan knew that Musian's natural furnace was very special, but she never thought that when Musian's natural furnace was exhausted, it would absorb the spiritual energy from the outside world in such a fierce way. Such an exaggerated absorption speed, not only can she perceive it, but the people in Yaokai and even the people in Shenhuang City can probably perceive it. At this moment, in the hall of Yaokai Holy Land, the mature Queen Mother of Yaokai was chatting with Fairy Yao Xian. This beautiful woman, who is in the fullest and plumpest stage of a woman, sits in a dignified posture and has an elegant manner. The years have not left any traces on her, but have precipitated the mature charm that a beautiful woman should have. If she walks with the saint of Yaokai and Fairy Yao Xian, people who don't know will probably just think that these are 3 sisters going out to relax. If the only difference is that compared with the 2 fairies, this beautiful woman has a bit more sexiness and maturity that a girl never has. "Queen Mother, it seems that Senior Kingdi used the Pure World Seed to suppress the 3 Return to Void Realm cultivators today." Fairy Yao Xian looked at Queen Mother Yaokai in front of the throne with her bright eyes and asked curiously. Queen Mother Yaokai nodded slightly and smiled. "The vine that can absorb the spiritual energy of others must be the Pure World Seed. As for the affairs of Kingdi, the current ruler of Yaokai Holy Land naturally knew a little bit. But didn't Senior Kingdi have spiritual energy? How did she do it?" Fairy Yao Xian asked curiously. Queen Mother Yaokai smiled but said nothing. She was also a little confused about this matter. In theory, the cauldron is an indispensable thing for cultivators. How did Kingdi suppress the 3 Return to Void Realm cultivators without the cauldron? Secret method. Just as Queen Mother Yaokai was thinking about this, she suddenly seemed to notice something and subconsciously looked up at the bedroom where Kingdi was. As a being in the Return to Void Realm, Queen Mother Yao Qi could naturally sense that a surge of spiritual energy was constantly pouring into the Green Emperor's bedroom. The cauldron of Senior Green Emperor has been restored and is absorbing spiritual energy from the outside world. When this thought flashed through Queen Mother Yaokai's mind, she soon became more suspicious. Impossible. If the cauldron was condensed, it stands to reason that her Yuan-Shen tribulation should also be descended. Moreover, before taking the Tiandan phoenix fruit, it should be impossible for Green Emperor to condense the cauldron. Queen Mother Yaokai's thoughts suddenly stopped, and her eyes were fixed on the bedroom where Green Emperor was. An alluring spiritual energy was slowly floating out of the bedroom where Green Emperor was. That was the spiritual energy that Musian had just overflowed after practicing dual cultivation with the green skirt fairy. Queen Mother Yaokai's eyes flickered slightly, as if she was thinking about something in secret. After a long time, she retracted her gaze, and then slightly closed her eyes, pinched her fingers, and quietly calculated something. After an unknown amount of time, the beautiful woman slowly opened her eyes, looked towards the direction of the Qing Emperor's bedroom, and murmured, "Natural furnace tripod." This natural furnace tripod is obviously not the physique of the Qing Emperor. Then the question arises. Who else lives in the bedroom where the Qing Emperor is now, besides the Qing Emperor? Almost at this moment, the Queen Mother of Yaoqi suddenly became clear in her mind. Why did the Qing Emperor let Musian follow her into the bedroom? Why did the Qing Emperor suppress the 3 return to void elders before? It's not just because Musian saved the Qing Emperor, so they have a good relationship. It's because, Musian is very likely to be the natural furnace tripod. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi stared at the Qing Emperor's bedroom with her beautiful eyes, but there was a bit more meaningful in her eyes. That night, not only in the Yaoqi Holy Land, but also in the Holy King City, some sensitive cultivators also noticed the surging spiritual energy that gathered towards the Qing Emperor's bedroom. Many people were discussing it, and some even thought that the Green Emperor had reshaped the cauldron, so he was absorbing the spiritual energy from the outside world. However, some elders of the ancient family had different opinions. If the Green Emperor's cauldron was condensed, it should have been the Yuan-Shen tribulation long ago, and it would not be like this. Obviously, this was not caused by the Green Emperor's reshaping of the cauldron. What on earth was it? While everyone was discussing it, Wang Meng, the elder of the Wang family, stared at the direction of the Yaoqi Holy Land. Did the elder find anything? The woman in the red skirt beside him couldn't help asking. Looking at the scene of the surging spiritual energy pouring into the Yaoqi Holy Land, Wang Meng suppressed his inner throbbing and slowly turned his head to look at the woman in the red skirt, his eyes full of horror. I know why the Green Emperor can use spiritual energy. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 215. The overwhelming spiritual energy gathered together like a tide, like a rainbow bridge, and rushed towards the palace where the Green Emperor was. Musian could clearly feel that the Tiansheng furnace in his body was vibrating slightly, as if it was dissatisfied, and as if it was afraid of the green skirt fairy standing by the window sill. Although this Tiansheng furnace was his physique, looking at the plump and attractive back of the green skirt fairy, Musian felt a sense of pleasure of revenge. Every time there was something good, this Tiansheng furnace would take it away first, without asking for the opinion of his owner. Is this good now? He met the Green Emperor and directly plundered all the spiritual energy of the Tiansheng furnace. Although Musian's body is also a little weak now. Look at the fairy in green skirt by the window sill. The fairy body wrapped in green skirt outlines a very tempting plump curve. Although the green skirt is a little loose and elegant, the night wind still perfectly presents her enchanting figure in front of her. She is obviously a sacred and inviolable fairy, but she has a sexy and graceful figure. The two are mixed together to form a huge charm. It should be said that she is worthy of being the Green Emperor. Although I have no worldly desires now, I still have some impulses and want to see the shy expression under her cold face again. Musian sighed silently in his heart, and then he noticed that the fairy in green skirt was staring into the distance, looking like she was thinking about something. What is the fairy worried about? Musian couldn't help asking. At this moment, Fairy Kinkan directly plundered the spiritual energy of the Tiansheng furnace. Logically speaking, those cultivators from the outside world should not be able to do anything to Fairy Kinkin. In this case, she seemed to be worried about something. Fairy Kinkin came back to her senses slightly, glanced at Musian faintly, and sighed softly, "I naturally have nothing to worry about here." She was not worried about herself. But Musian. Under Musian's puzzled eyes, Fairy Kinkin lightly raised her fingertips, grabbed the surging spiritual energy in the void, and then poured it directly into Musian's Tiansheng furnace. Normally, it is impossible for a cultivator's furnace to directly take in this spiritual energy, because the mixed spiritual energy is not allowed to be directly taken into the furnace. But the Tiansheng furnace is different, it will purify the mixed spiritual energy by itself, and there will be no disadvantages. If this physique can be used independently, it is not an exaggeration to say that it is the strongest physique, but unfortunately, this is just an auxiliary physique. Moreover, there is probably no other natural furnace cauldron like Musian that contains all kinds of natural treasures. That is why it is so troublesome. The natural furnace cauldron in Musian's body is running frantically. While absorbing the spiritual energy from the outside world, the aura of the natural furnace cauldron is also radiating. With the Fairy Kinkin, it is impossible for Musian to get hurt. But the Fairy Kinkin can protect Musian, which does not mean that Musian can be free from harassment. Spiritual energy is constantly injected into the natural furnace cauldron. Musian noticed the complicated look of the Fairy Kinkin, and he couldn't help but have more doubts in his heart. Did this fairy regret it after it was done, just like the sage mode of man? But it shouldn't be right. When he asked the fairy if she was satisfied just now, although she didn't answer, from her expression at that time and even the heavenly sound of the fairy tale lingering in the room, it can be said that she was satisfied by default. In this case, why is the look in her eyes looking at me so complicated now? When this thought just flashed through Musian's mind, he felt the operation of the natural furnace in his body and the breath in the room. For some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity. He closed his eyes slightly and felt the breath emanating from the natural furnace at this moment. This breath almost included all the treasures that Musian had obtained from the natural furnace before, and then, all these treasures were mixed together to become a rich breath that quietly drifted out of the king's boudoir. Musian fell into deep thought. Damn, something big happened. He finally reacted and looked up at the fairy in the green skirt, saying, "Is my natural furnace exposed?" This is the real reason why the fairy in the green skirt has such a complicated look at this moment. The fairy in the green skirt is not worried about her own situation, but she is worried about him. Exposed under Musian's gaze, the fairy in the green skirt opened her red lips slightly, held her forehead, and shook her head gently. Normally, even a natural furnace can't absorb the spiritual energy from the outside world at such an exaggerated speed, but Musian's natural furnace can't be inferred by common sense. However, most people don't know that you are a natural furnace. Fairy Kinkin continued to comfort Musian. Many people know that the Green Emperor returned to the Yaokai Holy Land this time. But very few people know that the Green Emperor brought a young man with him when he returned. As for those who know that the Green Emperor and Musian are intimate, they have been absorbed by the vines and completely disappeared from this world. However, most people don't know, but some ancient families will probably guess your physique. Fairy Kinkin said again. Musian pondered for a moment and said, "Will it pose a threat to my safety?" "With me here, there will be no threat," Fairy Kinkin said calmly. When she said this, her words were calm and confident, which made people believe it. "But I can't stay in Yaokai forever." Musian sighed. "After a while, when the Green Emperor reshapes the cauldron, he will return to Lianji sect. If the physique of the natural cauldron is exposed, the consequences will be disastrous. Although in the world of immortals, female cultivators can make their appearance at an upper middle level as long as they are willing, but Musian is not such a casual person. He pursues quality. He doesn't intend to raise all fish in the fish pond. In the final analysis, just the great white shark of the green skirt fairy has given Musian some headaches. Before, he thought that the green skirt fairy was the fish he raised, until after tonight, Musian deeply realized, in the eyes of the great white shark, he might be the fish. This female emperor has lived forever and has lived for more than 3 lifetimes. Naturally, her vision and strength are higher than Musian. On the surface, it seems that King Di is Musian's prey, but in King Di's eyes, Musian is the prey. In fact, you don't have to go back to Lianji section, King Di suddenly said. If you want in the future, you can choose to stay in Yaokai. Her voice suddenly became much softer, and the crisp and pleasant fairy sound seemed to reveal an irresistible charm. This is the Tao of Yaokai Holy Land, or the Tao of Yaokai Saint. The Tao followed by Yaokai Saint can minimize the hostility of others towards oneself. If you reduce your own hostility in battle, it is a very dangerous thing. In addition to the pure world green lotus, this is also one of the important reasons why King Di has been successful in the past. Musian nodded slightly and said, let's make plans for this later. Of course, he didn't really want to stay in Yaokai. This answer is almost the same as next time for sure, and it won't make people disgusted. You can decide whether to go or stay. I'm just giving you one of the feasible paths, but you can decide what you want to do in the future. Fairy Kinkin smiled faintly. I understand. She is asking me if I want to be a gigolo. If I do, I can live in Yaokai and hug her legs every day. Musian understood. Fairy Kinkin suddenly said, but it's true. After all, you still have a Taoist partner and sister in Lianji sect who you care about. In addition, there seems to be a senior sister who you secretly admire. It's normal for you to want to go back to Lianji section, she continued. This fairy had never slept before and had been peeping in my body. Almost when Musian heard Fairy Kinkin's words, he already had the answer in his heart. It's okay for other people, but Fairy Kinkin knew that he and his senior sister had met so few times. This is obviously because he had never slept in his natural furnace in the past. But then again, since she knew that I was a scumbag, she knew that I couldn't bear to leave the girl next to me, why would she agree to practice dual cultivation with me? Because of the Tianzhengluding? Or? When Musian just thought of this, he heard the fairy in green skirt say faintly, don't think too much. If I really hate you, even if you are the Tianzhengluding, I will not agree to be with you. When she said this, she suddenly fell silent, but Musian already knew what she wanted to express. At this moment, Musian's heart was inexplicably moved. He stood up and came behind the fairy in green skirt, holding her plump waist with one hand, feeling the soft and delicate body of the Empress, and said softly, I have never doubted you. Spiritual energy continued to flow into the Tianzhengluding, but Musian didn't care about the situation of the Tianzhengluding at all, and silently felt the beauty of the fairy in green skirt's body. Although the Empress was still indifferent during the conversation just now, she was obviously not used to Musian's intimate behavior. Or in other words, she was not used to how to act when she was in a passive state, so she looked a little at a loss for a while. And that cold and beautiful face was stained with a drunken blush, so beautiful that it moved people's hearts. Musian let her sit on the window sill. Her delicate feet in a pair of exquisite embroidered shoes were swaying gently as her hips pressed on the table. Musian raised his hand and placed it on her delicate and flawless face, staring into the eyes of the fairy in the green skirt. Until now, the fairy in the green skirt still seemed to be covered by a layer of soft moonlight. Although she was extremely close to him at the moment, she gave people a sense of infinite distance. This feeling was like tickling people's hearts, with an indescribable temptation. But Musian didn't care. His thumb touched her soft lips lightly, and then under the twinkling eyes of the fairy in the green skirt, he leaned forward and kissed her lips again. The natural furnace has no spiritual energy, but you still have such a refined taste. The fairy in the green skirt stared at him slowly, and her voice sounded in Musian's heart. There seemed to be a hint of enchanting charm in those cold eyes of the past. Musian stroked the face of the fairy in the green skirt and said in the same voice, "It's not that I have a taste for elegance, it's just that you have this kind of charm." Under normal circumstances, Musian would have been tired and lying on the bed to rest by now, but the contrast between the fairy in the green skirt's past unattainable coldness and the charm at this moment brought about a charm that was so tempting that people wanted to taste it again no matter what. Under Musian's gaze, the fairy in the green skirt slowly closed her eyes, her long and curled eyelashes seemed to hold the hazy moonlight, reflecting her delicate face. Musian enjoyed her soft lips without rouge. The last time he was sneak attacked by the fairy in the restricted area, he was a little restrained, but now he was not restrained at all in the boudoir of the Qing Emperor. Time passed quietly, until after an unknown amount of time, a slight footstep suddenly came to the ears of the two. Then, a knock on the door sounded. "Senior Kingdi, the Queen Mother is asking for an audience outside the side hall." It was the voice of the Saint of Yaokai. This pleasant fairy sound similar to that of the fairy in the green skirt also broke the ambiguity in the room. The fairy in the green skirt opened her eyes silently, with a hint of strangeness in her eyes. "I almost forgot that I had just promised the Saint of Yaoqi that I would meet her in the side hall later." The fairy in green skirt gently pushed Musian away, and at the same time pressed down his right hand that was hugging her and doing whatever he wanted, and turned her head slightly to look at the door. "I know, you can leave first," she replied calmly. But, her expression when she looked at Musian was extremely tempting. However, the Saint of Yaoqi did not leave, but hesitated, and said, "In addition, the elders of several ancient families also wanted to see you outside Yaoqi." The fairy in green skirt said softly, and only when she heard the footsteps of the Saint of Yaoqi gradually faded away did she carelessly put her slightly messy hair behind her ears. Then, she adjusted the collar of her clothes, raised her gorgeous green eyes, and said, "Let's go." Her expression was normal, as if nothing had happened in the room just now. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, even Musian himself would have found it hard to believe that this fairy had just shown such a shy and charming look. Musian stopped when he saw that it was good, nodded slightly, followed the fairy in the green skirt out of the room, and breathed the fresh air outside for the first time in a long time. At this time, the fairy in the green skirt suddenly said, "Guess what they are here for?" Musian pondered for a moment and said, "I don't know much about the Queen Mother of Yaokai, but the elders of several ancient families should have noticed the changes in you, so they came to see you." After the fairy in the green skirt obtained the spiritual energy of the natural furnace, some ordinary cultivators might not be able to detect it, but those cultivators in the return to void realm could definitely detect the terrifying pressure emanating from the fairy in the green skirt at that time. Musian also felt that pressure just now, but he was bound by vines at that time, so he didn't react much. "Am I right?" Musian continued to ask. "Yes, but not entirely," the fairy in the green skirt smiled. However, there seemed to be a hint of danger under that faint smile. "They are not just here to see me." Her cool and slender fingertips gently touched Musian's face and brushed aside his hair. "I'm afraid, they are still here to propose marriage." Warm Ti. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 216. Someone came to Yaoqi to propose marriage? After hearing what Fairy Kinkan said, Musian was confused for a moment, then asked, "Are they looking for the Saint of Yaoqi?" Although the Green Emperor has not been completely reborn, he is only one step away from condensing the cauldron. In this case, the ancient families in the Holy King City, no matter what their original attitude towards the Holy Land of Yaoqi was, would naturally want to make friends with it, or even marry it after hearing this news. And the most suitable candidate is naturally the Saint of Yaoqi. Fairy Kinkan shook her head slowly and said, "Every Saint of Yaoqi may inherit the position of Queen Mother of Yaoqi in the future. Yao Yu is a very smart woman and it is impossible for her to marry into other ancient families. In the final analysis, the saint of Yaoqi has only had one experience of marrying into other ancient families since ancient times. This is not because the Holy Land of Yaoqi secretly stopped it, but most of the saints of Yaoqi are arrogant in their bones. Compared with marrying, they are more willing to work hard on their own and aim for the existence of the Green Emperor. Unless the relationship between the two is really good, it is basically impossible. This also led to the fact that the physique of the natural Taoist fetus has only had two experiences of dual cultivation from the past to the present. One was the former Yaoqi saint 100 years ago, and the other was this time with Musian and the fairy Kinkan. Yao Yu, the saint of Yaoqi in this generation, has the highest talent from ancient times to the present. Some people even think that except for the Green Emperor, her talent is the best in Yaoqi. If the object of the marriage proposal is not Yao Yu, then it can't be you, Musian complained in his heart. He naturally knew that even if these ancient families had 100 courages, they would not dare to propose to the Green Emperor. The aura emitted by the cultivators of the Hedeo realm alone naturally suppresses other cultivators, and this suppression is like blood suppression. This is not just craving for the body of the fairy Kinkan can resist it. Musian can resist it, not entirely because of LSP, but more because the Green Emperor deliberately restrains his own aura, and he has strengthened his physique several times in the past, and there is also the ghost painting talisman given to him by Ling long before. All these combined gave Musian a certain amount of room to operate and dare to suppress the Green Emperor. Otherwise, it would not be him who suppressed the Green Skirt Fairy tonight, but the Green Skirt Fairy who suppressed him. But besides the saint of Yaoqi, who else could those ancient families propose marriage to? A daughter of the direct line in Yaoqi? When Musian thought of this, he noticed the intentional or unintentional gaze of the Green Skirt Fairy, and was slightly stunned. He had a certain guess in his heart and hesitated, could it be me? If nothing unexpected happens, the Green Skirt Fairy smiled and nodded. But there was a little more meaningful look in her eyes when she looked at Musian. Musian's natural furnace tripod is unique in the world. The aura in the natural furnace tripod was accidentally released this time, and it would naturally be noticed by some of the ancient families in the Holy King City. They may not know that Musian's natural furnace tripod has been strengthened several times, but just knowing that Musian is a natural furnace tripod is worth winning over. Musian's talent may not be top-notch, but his ability to assist others is top-notch. And the relationship between Musian and King Di seems to be very close. Once King Di condenses the cauldron, Yaokai will be another giant in Dongzhou in the future, overlooking Dongzhou. Proposing marriage now and waiting for King Di to reunite with the cauldron and confirm that she has returned to the peak before proposing, are two completely different situations. Hearing the Kinkan Fairy's frank admission, Musian couldn't help but have a bit more strangeness in his eyes. If I remember correctly, there are nearly 100 major forces in Dongzhou alone, among which there are about 10 ancient families holding ancestral artifacts. This time, those who come to Yaokai Holy Land to propose marriage must be ancient families holding ancestral artifacts. I don't know what the physiques of these ancient families' daughters of heaven are like. He is not interested in women, but he is curious about the physiques of these daughters of heaven. There are tens of millions of physiques in this world, but there are very few top physiques. However, being able to become an ancient family in a place like Dongzhou, the inherited physique will naturally not be too bad. Among the 9 states, only Dongzhou has the most vast soil. There are also a lot of spiritual mines and even some natural treasures, which also gives some families a lot of opportunities. Some ancient families evolved from this. In order to cultivate a strong physique, the ancient families often have to pay a lot of resources, just to be able to strengthen the physique inherited from their ancestors to the limit. Of course, the only one who can really make the physique evolve to the extreme is the restricted area. Because there is spiritual energy in the turning pool of the restricted area that can strengthen the physique, which is not available in the outside world. Anyway, go out and take a look first. If it is really coming for you, maybe you can consider it. The tall green skirt beauty slightly turned her head to look at Musian with a gentle smile on her face, as if she was sincerely making a suggestion. However, Musian shook his head firmly. Even if it is a marriage proposal from the ancient family, I will never accept it. Maybe in the eyes of the fairy, Mu is a playboy, but in my heart, only you are the most important person. The fairy in the green skirt raised her eyebrows slightly and just glanced at him. Although there was no sign that Musian was lying, however, after living in Musian's body for so long in the past, she still had some understanding of this young man. The fairy in the green skirt said with a faint smile, "Let's go to the side hall first." Following the fairy in the green skirt, they came to the side hall, and soon Musian saw a beautiful woman dressed elegantly and luxuriously. The Queen Mother of Yeokai is also the current ruler of Yeokai Holy Land. This is a beautiful woman with a sexy figure. Time has not left any trace on her body. Under the double-breasted dress, her plump breasts are proudly held up. Her lower body is a white skirt, like a plump peony flower, with elegant temperament. And mature. As for the Yeokai saint, she seems to have dots of silver on her body, reflecting her snow-white skin. Her hair is spread down her back, her mouth is rosy, and her eyes are bright. She seems to have had the grace of Qing Emperor when he was young, but she lacks the mystery and intellectuality of the fairy in the green skirt and has more of the romance of a girl. Senior Qing Emperor. The Yeokai saint immediately noticed the presence of Qing Emperor and said respectfully. Then, he looked at Musian suspiciously. How did they come here together? The Queen Mother of Yeokai also raised her head and looked over. When she noticed Fairy Kinkin's restrained aura, Danfan's beautiful eyes couldn't help but have a hint of surprise. Senior Kingdi's spiritual energy seems to have recovered a little, Queen Mother of Yeokai asked. I only got part of the spiritual energy, but it's enough, Fairy Kinkin said with a faint smile. She has waterfall-like hair spread down her back, with a white ribbon standing at the end of her hair. When her exquisite embroidered shoes step on the ground, the green silk hanging down to her calf gently flutters. Musian noticed that the Yeokai saint was looking at her intentionally or unintentionally, so he gave her a kind smile. The saint of Yeokai also smiled, and then glanced at Musian's back with a slightly strange look. From the beginning, wherever Musian went, the spiritual energy condensed from the outside world followed him, and then continued to flow into his body. Obviously, these spiritual energies are heading towards Musian's natural furnace. This also means that Musian's natural furnace should have consumed a lot of energy, but why was so much spiritual energy consumed in the Qing Emperor's palace? The saint of Yeokai didn't know, or rather, she didn't dare to think about it. At this moment, the Queen Mother of Yeokai suddenly asked, Senior Qing Emperor, does Mu Xiao's physique seem to be different from ordinary people? When she said this, her eyes looked at Musian intentionally or unintentionally. The Holy Maiden of Yeokai can detect the spiritual energy that is constantly gathering into Musian's body, and naturally the leader of Yeokai can also detect it. You already know the truth, don't you? Fairy Kinkin said with a faint smile. Then, she paused and continued, Musian is indeed a natural furnace. After the words fell, the beautiful eyes of the Queen Mother of Yeokai quietly lit up with a touch of brilliance. The Yeokai saint's eyes also looked at Musian almost subconsciously. I'm afraid, it's not just a natural cauldron, right? The Queen Mother of Yeokai stared at Musian with her beautiful eyes, but there was something meaningful in her eyes. Musian naturally couldn't interrupt the conversation between the two seniors, so he poured himself a cup of tea, then poured a cup of tea for the three of them, and sat silently aside to drink the tea. He also needs a little rest, even though all the spiritual energy from the natural furnace was consumed, he did all the physical work in the room just now. I have been to the restricted area in the past and watched the test in the reincarnation pond. The Queen Mother of Yeokai mentioned the matter nonchalantly. She had a gentle smile on her face, and her plump figure was hidden under the luxurious robe, as if just like a peach, honey juice will drip out when you pinch it. There seems to be more than one spiritual energy in his body that he got from the reincarnation pool. The aura of the reincarnation pool is a good thing that can strengthen one's own physique. In the past, Mujian's natural furnace cauldron was covered by ordinary aura, so these good things were not very obvious. But now, because the natural furnace cauldron has been drained cleanly, Mujian at this moment is simply like a walking mobile treasure. What is contained in the treasure is a treasure that even the Queen Mother of Yaokai, who has seen all kinds of things in the world, is moved by. Just strengthening one's physique is already an irresistible temptation, not to mention that there are more good things in Mujian's natural furnace. As he is in the God refining realm, he can help to advance to the level of the returning to the void realm. If given time, Mujian can be promoted to the returning to the void realm. Maybe it is not impossible to reach the realm of enlightenment that is not allowed by the rules of heaven and earth. What is needed between the realm of returning to the realm of reality and the realm of enlightenment is neither luck nor talent. To reach the realm of enlightenment, what is needed is spiritual energy. This aura does not refer to the aura of the outside world, but the aura of enlightenment. 10,000 years ago, the extremely rare spiritual energy of enlightenment still floated between heaven and earth. The monks at the peak of returning to the void could use the spiritual energy of enlightenment to advance to the realm of enlightenment when the time, place, and people were favorable. The so-called enlightenment refers to one of the three realms, heaven, earth, and man. There is no distinction between the three. To achieve enlightenment is as difficult as reaching heaven. However, Mujian's natural furnace contains spiritual energy that can directly advance people to the realm of enlightenment. This is naturally exciting. Of course, the premise of everything is that Mujian can be promoted and returned to the void, because the natural furnace cauldron is bound to be a higher level than Mujian's own level. Only the spiritual energy of the enlightenment level can break the rules of heaven and earth. Crucial role. Why does this woman keep staring at me? Sensing the beautiful woman's gaze, Mujian calmly took a sip of tea, pretending to be calm. The fairy in green skirt beside her glanced at the Queen Mother of Yaokai inadvertently, and then said lightly, "He did get some spiritual energy from the reincarnation pool. However, cultivation should still rely on individuals, and don't dream of reaching it through shortcuts," fairy in green skirt warned intentionally or unintentionally. Queen Mother of Yaokai came back to her senses and couldn't help but glance at fairy in green skirt. Mujian's natural furnace was extremely empty, while the spiritual energy of the Green Emperor was much more full. Even a fool could guess something. But this beautiful woman who called the wind and rain in Dongzhou, under the kind eyes of the Green Emperor, still nodded slightly and humbly accepted her warning. Then, she suddenly remembered something and said, "Today, several ancient families sent people to Yaokai to congratulate you. In addition..." She paused and glanced at Mujian again. "Just say it," fairy in green skirt smiled. "Besides that, they all introduced their own beloved daughters, hoping to bring them together with Mr. Mu." As expected, the green-skirted fairy still had a calm smile on her face. Her face was extremely beautiful, and her expression never changed. But for some reason, there seemed to be a little more danger in that calm smile. "Are they in Yaokai now?" she asked. The Queen Mother of Yaokai nodded slightly. Then, she couldn't help but ask, "Are you going to meet them?" "Since they are here, let's meet them." The green-skirted fairy turned her head slightly to look at the young man beside her, staring at him with her eyes, and smiled faintly. "You should be interested, right?" "Not too much." Mujian immediately shook his head and denied it very reservedly. The relationship between him and the Green Emperor was very complicated. Although they had experienced dual cultivation and kissed before, in the final analysis, the Green Emperor just needed the spiritual energy in his natural furnace. The relationship between him and the Green Emperor is like a fork in the road. If he makes a mistake at this moment, this line may be lost. If he wants to hold the Green Emperor's long legs tightly, he must not make a wrong choice now. Now he should consolidate his relationship with the Green Emperor. When the relationship is deep and he knows each other's depth, it will be much easier to operate other lines. The green skirt fairy looked at Musian meaningfully, but did not continue to ask questions. Instead, she looked up in a certain direction outside the palace. "Let's go," she said softly. She was a little interested in what kind of beautiful girl the ancient families wanted to introduce to Musian. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 217. Most of the ancient families are at the top of the list in Dongzhou. If a family has an ancestral artifact, it will be the top force, excluding the restricted area and Lianji sect. There are 8 ancient families visiting Yaokai Holy Land this time, and 2 of them have ancestral artifacts. The rest of the ancient families have never been to Yaokai, just because the journey is long, so some of them have not yet arrived at the Holy King City. And some of them did not notice Musian's natural furnace, so they did not have too many associations. To put it bluntly, they are still in the dark, because they don't know the constitution of Musian's natural furnace, so naturally they will not think that the Green Emperor may have recovered some of his spiritual energy. In the end, no one would think that the Green Emperor would practice dual cultivation with a young cultivator. Even now that they have known about Musian's natural furnace, there are still few people who dare to speculate in this regard. They only think that the Green Emperor used some secret method to forcibly absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth for his own use. After all, it is not impossible for such a gorgeous empress to have such magical powers. When Musian followed King Di and others to Yaokai, he immediately heard a hearty laugh from inside. "Wang Meng, I didn't expect that even you are here. It seems that even the most arrogant people will still be restrained in front of King Di." The old voice seemed to reveal some teasing and ridicule. The old man who was teased was Wang Meng, a guest of the Wang family who had just arrived in Shenwang City not long ago. The woman next to him, wearing a red dress, was charming and attracted the attention of many fellow cultivators since she stepped into it. It is rumored that Wang Ying, the pearl of the Wang family, was born with a charming bone, and her every move was enough to make people dream about it. In the past, many people were a little skeptical about such rumors. But now, after seeing the real person, the doubts in the past were immediately dispelled. Wang Ying is indeed extremely charming in both temperament and appearance, and her soft figure and long legs as slender as jade under the red skirt are even more eye-catching. Wang Meng smiled and said, "Now that the Green Emperor has been reborn, people from all directions come to pay homage to him. We visit Yaokai just to pay homage to the Green Emperor. If it is according to Elder Shi's meaning, could it be that the Green Emperor is not worthy of our homage? Who does Elder Shi think we should pay homage to? Should we pay homage to you?" A big and round hat was put on the head of the elder of Swanyan Palace. For a while, some people in the other ancient families also looked at Elder Shi intentionally or unintentionally. Elder Shi sneered and said, "Since you are paying homage to the Green Emperor, why are you bringing the apple of the eye of the head of the Wang family? Miss has always admired the immortal appearance of the Green Emperor. Today I learned that she is suspected to have recovered her immortal body and wants to pay homage to Yaokai. Is there anything wrong with that?" Wang Meng smiled lightly. "Hey, that's what you said, but aren't you here for the natural furnace cauldron?" A merciless voice came from the side. Most of the ancient families who came to the Yaokai Holy Land today came to pay homage to the Green Emperor on the one hand, and on the other hand, they wanted to confirm whether there was really a person with the natural furnace cauldron hiding in the Yaokai. Fairy Yao Xian listened to the conversation between several people, holding her cheek with her hand, and yawned a little as if she was a little bored. At this time, she seemed to have noticed something, and her eyes turned, and her almond eyes looked straight at the outside of the Yaokai not far away from her side, and her eyes quickly fell on the body of the green skirt fairy, and her eyes were a little bright. Several elders also noticed the green skirt fairy, and after turning their heads to look, they all raised their hands and bowed, respectfully saying, "Green Emperor." Then, they secretly looked at Musian for a few more times, and there seemed to be some curiosity in their eyes. They knew that the relationship between this young man and the Green Emperor was very close, but even in such an occasion, he followed her, which naturally made people care. Being stared at by a group of old monsters, even Musian felt somewhat uncomfortable. He could only politely nod to the elders and then found a seat nearby. He was just a guest, so it was inconvenient for him to say anything in such an occasion. Fortunately, besides Musian, there were several peers of the same age, so even if Musian sat here, it would not be too abrupt. As soon as Musian sat down, he immediately felt a slightly unfamiliar gaze coming from beside him. He raised his head and saw a woman who looked a little unfamiliar. She looked quite charming and seductive in her dress, and her beautiful eyes were full of affection, which made people think that this woman and I are destined to be together. The saint of Yaokai, who was not far away, seemed to know what Musian was thinking, and transmitted the message, "She is Wang Ying, the eldest daughter of the Wang family. She seems to have reached the 6th level of soul refining and is also a top-ranked genius in Dongzhou." Musian looked thoughtful. He had heard of the Wang family in Dongzhou before. The Wang family had great power in Dongzhou. It was rumored that the daughter of the Wang family was loved by many elders and her own strength was even more amazing. However, he didn't know how powerful she was now. Her figure was indeed amazing. Of course, even an amazing woman could not compare to the heavy weight on the chest of the fairy in the green skirt. That weight was not something that these girls could compare to, that's why Musian liked the royal sister. Especially the fairy in green skirt is the best at this stage. After all, she can be said to have both fame and fortune and no pursuit. This is the most suitable target for a gigolo. However, the temperament of this beauty always feels familiar. Musian looked at Wang Ying's snow-white long legs under the red skirt, and for some reason, always felt a little familiar. This time it was not because of the superficial reason of craving her body, but really felt familiar. Is it my LSP heart that is acting up, or have I really seen her before? Musian frowned secretly and thought. Soon, Musian noticed that the old man who was secretly competing with the guest of the Wang family at this moment also had an amazing aura on his body. Obviously, this elder should be at the same level as the guest of the Wang family. Who is the person who is arguing with the guest of the Wang family next to him? The third elder of the Swanyan Palace. He should also come for you this time, Yaokai Saint said in a voice transmission. The master of Swanyan Palace has a little daughter who has been weak and sickly since childhood. This time, elder, she probably noticed your Tiansheng looting, so he came to you. What's the point of coming to me if you are weak and sick? Musian's eyes were a little more strange. He is Tiansheng looting, not a doctor. Why come to him instead of a doctor for such a thing? Could it be that Tiansheng looting can also cure physical weakness? The physique of Swanyan Palace is very special. Only a few people can inherit the Swanyan body. This physique will always be in a weak and sickly state before the refining God realm. Even in the refining God realm, they will still be troubled by physical weakness. The saint of Yaokai sat quietly at the table, looking at the elders who came in one after another, and continued to transmit. Only after entering the return to void realm, the Swanyan body will become complete and no longer be disturbed by these worldly things. In the past, the Swanyan body has never lost in the competition with fellow cultivators. This physique has a lot of negative buffs, but it looks like this physique is also very powerful, Musian understood slightly in his heart. In addition, the Lu family and the Lan family of Dongzhou, as well as the 2 major halls and the 3 major pavilions, also sent people here this time. On the one hand, they want to pay homage to Senior Kingdi. On the other hand, I'm afraid it's... The saint of Yaokai paused, and looked at Musian intentionally or unintentionally. This is before they knew that Musian's natural furnace was not just an ordinary natural furnace. If they knew that he had spiritual energy that could strengthen other people's physiques and even the energy of heaven that could bless their luck, these people might have to fight on the spot. What does Mr. Mu think? Yao Qi Saint suddenly asked. She knew that Musian had a good relationship with Lan Murian. In addition, it seemed that there was also a beautiful girl living in his villa. Yao Qi Saint did not have a deep impression of Bai Ruoxi, but she only remembered how small the breasts of Miss Bai were. With two such beautiful confidants, it was still very curious what Musian thought of these marriage proposals. And if I guessed correctly, Senior Kingdi might also be in love with Musian. Musian shook his head gently and said, "Let Senior Kingdi decide. I'm not very interested in marriage. Besides, I already have someone I like in my heart," Musian continued. The Saint of Yaokai looked at Musian silently, hesitated for a moment, and suddenly sent a voice message, "Mr. Mu, can you ask a more rude question?" At the end, the Saint of Yaokai stared at Musian silently, and her face looked more serious. "Fairy Yao Yu, please speak." The Saint of Yaokai hesitated for a moment and sent a voice message, "Are you and Senior Kingdi?" When she said this, she was silent, but she stared at Musian with a pair of eyes. For this matter, even the cold Saint of Yaokai was a little concerned. Under normal circumstances, she was completely uninterested in gossip. But if it involves Kingdi, it's really hard for people not to care. This matter involves too much, and it is difficult to explain it clearly in a short time. Musian smiled gently, looked at the Saint of Yaoqi, and said, "If the fairy is interested, let's find a time next time to talk about this matter while drinking tea and discussing the Dao." Okay, the Saint of Yaoqi smiled lightly and stopped asking. The Saint of Yaoqi is a very wise woman. She saw that Musian was reluctant to say more about this matter for the time being, so she did not ask. However, what Musian said just now still made the Saint of Yaoqi realize one thing: something really happened between Musian and Kingdi. While the two were chatting in secret, several ancient families had already sent gifts. Then, Elder Shi of Swanyan Hall clasped his hands and bowed, saying, "Senior Kingdi, this time, in addition to congratulating you, I have another thing to ask." As soon as the voice fell, the elders or guests of several ancient families not far away all looked at this preemptive old man. You say? The fairy in green skirt opened her red lips slightly, with a faint smile on her face, and her snow-white skin looked even more crystal clear against the thin green dress. From the outside, it is completely unrealistic that this is actually a female emperor who has lived for more than 3 lifetimes. According to the time of Juzhu, each lifetime is 5,000 years, so this female emperor has lived for more than 10,000 years. My young lady is 17 years old and is deeply troubled by the Swanyan body. Before she reached the realm of refining gods, she often suffered from colds, fever, and physical weakness and illness like ordinary people. Elder Shi paused, clasped his fists and said, "Tonight there is a strange phenomenon, a large amount of spiritual energy gathers in Yaokai, and the person who attracts so much spiritual energy is this little friend Mu not far from me, right?" When he said this, a gentle smile appeared on his face, and he looked at Musian with a rather friendly look. Although it is only a first-grade god refining, it is a natural cauldron. In addition, the relationship between Musian and Qing Emperor is suspected to be good. If the two families get married in the future, Musian will marry into the Swanyan Palace, and he can also assist the young lady speed up her journey to the god refining realm and even the void returning realm. Is he a natural furnace? Elder Shi asked again. After the words fell, the guests who were visiting tonight all looked at this magnificent empress involuntarily. He is indeed a natural furnace under the eyes of everyone, Fairy Kinkan affirmed. When the voice fell, almost all the eyes present involuntarily fell on Musian. Even though he had already guessed and even confirmed it before coming, it was still a bit shocking to get the admission from Kingdi. A physique like the natural furnace cauldron actually exists, even to the point of being in the God-refining realm. There are actually very few monks who have reached the realm of refining gods at Musian's age, not to mention that he was born with a furnace. At this moment, not only the elders of the Huanggu family, but also many people in the Yaokai Holy Land looked at Musian involuntarily. At this time, Elder Shi suddenly said, "To be honest, I came to Yaokai today for one more thing, and that is to ask little friend Mu what he thinks of my young lady. I don't even know what your young lady looks like. What do you think I think?" Musian smiled and said nothing. When the Swanyan body reaches the realm of refining gods, it will no longer be troubled by wind and cold like ordinary people. Although it is still weak, it is enough. In the journey of cultivating immortals, it is not a good idea to just rely on the natural furnace to take a shortcut. Idea, Wang Meng mocked coldly. Elder Wang Meng is very righteous in what he said, but you even brought Miss Wang Ying today. Do you dare to say that you are not here for the natural furnace? Another elder from the ancient family next to him exposed it mercilessly. It's different in nature. Marriage should naturally take into account the feelings between the two parties, not just the interests, Wang Meng said lightly. It's all about profit, Elder Shi sneered. How dare I ask Elder Wang Meng, did Wang Ying and Mu Xiao know each other in the past? We've never met each other before, so you came here rashly to propose marriage. How can you talk about feelings? Emotions can be cultivated slowly. When we propose marriage, it is not purely for profit. Wang Meng paused and looked at Musian. Besides, you can also ask Mr. Mu what his attitude towards my young lady is. The topic suddenly turned to Musian, and everyone's attention also fell on Musian. You can tear her apart, don't blame me for everything. Musian glanced at the woman in a red dress sitting not far opposite. She has an excellent figure. She is wearing a low-cut red dress that exposes a little bit of white. She is sitting sideways on a tea chair, looking as if nothing has anything to do with her, and she is drinking tea leisurely. However, when Elder Shi mentioned this matter, Wang Ying still looked at Musian intentionally or unintentionally. Musian's eyes met hers, and for some reason, his heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably. I've definitely seen this Wang Ying somewhere before, this thought immediately flashed through his mind. Although he had never heard of the name Wang Ying, Musian felt familiar with this charming look. But who is it? Musian frowned secretly and stared, thinking about such things. Hearing this, Elder Shi of Swanyan Palace immediately said angrily, "You brought all your ladies to the Yaokai Holy Land. Is it possible that Mu Xiao can still say that he doesn't like it? Then why don't you bring your young lady here?" Wang Meng asked calmly without raising his eyes. The elder of Swanyan Palace looked angry, and his spiritual energy almost exploded. The saint of Swanyan Temple has been frail and sick due to her special constitution since she was a child, so she lives in seclusion, let alone travels far away. Wang Meng's words were a direct attack on someone's weakness. If Emperor Qing hadn't been watching from the side, Elder Shi might have already taken action. Seeing that the atmosphere suddenly seemed to be a little more explosive, Musian was thinking about whether he should stop it in time. At this moment, he suddenly felt a slight burning sensation coming from a certain mark in his body. Musian closed his eyes slightly, feeling the changes in his body. Soon, he quietly opened his eyes. The mark left by the Queen of the Demon Realm reacted. Among the people present, are there demon cultivators from the demon world? This thought flashed through Musian's mind. When Musian was thinking of this, Fairy Kinkan had already spoken in time to quiet everyone down. Then, a voice as sweet as the sound of nature came softly from the Yaokai, "Musian once saved my life." After saying this, one of the young men who followed the clan elders to see the Qing emperor couldn't help but said, "How could a monk in the god-refining realm save the senior?" When he said this, he looked at Musian in disbelief. The fairy in the green skirt just glanced at the boy calmly and did not answer. The elder behind the boy grabbed his shoulder and pulled him directly behind him, then clasped his fists to the Green Emperor and said, My young master is ignorant, I hope Senior Green Emperor will forgive me. Although I don't know how a kid in the refining spirit realm rescued the Green Emperor, asking questions now, isn't that questioning whether the Green Emperor is lying? Many of these disciples from ancient families are arrogant in their bones. In their opinion, even the return to Void Realm may not be able to help the Green Emperor, let alone Musian, a cultivator in the refining spirit realm. However, the Green Emperor could not lie, at least she could not lie about such things. And this also means that Musian really saved the Green Emperor's life. This is a great favor. In the future, after the Green Emperor obtains the heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit and condenses the Dinglu, no one will dare to attack Musian in Dongzhou. Similarly, the future Musian is also tied to the chariot of the Yaokai Holy Land. When thinking of this, some old monsters looked at Musian with a little more burning in their eyes. At this time, the fairy in green skirt spoke again. Musian told me before that he has no plan to find a Taoist partner for the time being, so there is no need to mention this matter in the future. It's not that I don't have it, Musian complained in his heart, but his face was still calm, and his eyes swept over the elders of the ancient families and the talented boys and girls who followed them. When he came to Yaokai before, the mark of the demon world did not react at all, but now it has reacted. This also means that there are demon cultivators among these ancient families. If so, who is it? Also, did the Green Emperor also notice it? Musian didn't know, and looking at the Green Emperor's current expression, he couldn't tell anything. Although this fairy looked good, her skin was even covered with charming silver light, which seemed quite friendly. However, in fact, the water of the fairy in green skirt was still very deep. And it was unexpectedly a bit overbearing. She only likes to cheat on others, but doesn't like to be cheated on by others. Musian didn't know whether this was a good thing or not. If he only had Fairy Kinkan as his Taoist partner, it wouldn't matter, but he had more than one Taoist partner around him. No, he only had one Taoist partner, but he had two sisters with whom he had a good relationship, and one sister and one senior sister with whom he had a good relationship. And recently, the sister with whom he had a good relationship seemed to have a bit of a dark sign. Just when Musian was worrying about what to do in the future, Fairy Kinkan suddenly smiled brightly and continued, "Of course, if he falls in love with a girl later, I won't stop him." After this, even the elders of these ancient families couldn't say anything at this moment, so they could only respond. But their eyes drifted to Musian on the side intentionally or unintentionally. Fairy Kinkan didn't stop them from proposing marriage, which also meant that she didn't plan to keep Musian in the Yaokai Holy Land in the future, which made them feel a little relieved. This is a very easy thing to judge. If the Green Emperor wants to keep Musian, he can betroth the fairy in Yaokai to Musian to keep him. But she did not do so, but let Musian make his own choice. It should be said that he is worthy of being the Green Emperor. Although the natural furnace tripod is extremely rare, the Green Emperor still has a pattern. He has never used his power to oppress others, and has never thought of using the natural furnace tripod to do anything. As for what the Green Emperor just said, Musian said that he has no plans to get married, that's what he said, but I think it's just because this young man has too little experience and has never seen too many beautiful girls. In the future, when Musian leaves the Yaokai Holy Land, it will be the best time for them to invite Musian to visit their family. Once he sees his own lady, won't Musian be seduced to death? The elders of several ancient families all had the same idea in their minds, and they must take down Musian. Afterwards, everyone presented gifts and then said goodbye and left. Musian glanced at the elders who left, with a thoughtful look in his eyes. He knew that there must be a demon cultivator among these people, but, who is it? After all, a demon cultivator came under the nose of the Green Emperor in a dignified manner. Isn't he afraid of being discovered by her and slapped to death? Or is the other party confident enough to escape under the nose of the Green Emperor? But this is not very realistic, unless the other party and the Green Emperor are of the same level. However, in the demon world, this kind of existence should only be the beautiful snake. Musian's thoughts suddenly stopped in his mind, and he stared blankly at the direction where Wang Ying left. Could it be her? After this time, these ancient families, whether they were hostile at the beginning or not, will probably not act rashly in the future, Yao Qi Saint said softly, looking at the elders and young disciples who left. These ancient families visited Yao Qi this time, firstly to propose marriage, and secondly, to see what the physical condition of the Green Emperor was like now. Originally, in order to protect the heavenly Dan Phoenix tree, the holy land of Yao Qi used the barrier of Yao Qi, and many people were even ready to sacrifice. But this time, the Green Emperor took action and directly swept away all the troubles. Seeing the state of the Green Emperor this time, even if Yao Qi put away the barrier, no one would dare to rashly attempt to destroy the heavenly Dan Phoenix tree. Fairy Yao Xian held her cheek with her hand and looked at Musian, blinking her bright eyes, and said, "Your natural furnace is really popular, but you really don't plan to accept the invitation of other ancient families. You also saw the beautiful girl of the Wang family just now, right? She is charming and has a good figure. The talented girls of other ancient families are also very beautiful. I have seen a few of them before," Yao Xian continued. Musian came back to his senses, shook his head and smiled, "I am not interested in finding a Taoist partner. Besides, a Taoist partner should be found by chance, not by introductions from others, right?" Musian smiled and looked at the girl who was about the same age as Ye Lingxian. Girls of this age like some pink love fantasies, so Musian's words just hit Yao Xian's heart, so that the girl subconsciously nodded and agreed with Musian's words. The Queen Mother of Yaokai on the side told the elders not to take it lightly and to take good care of the Tiandan Phoenix tree. Musian listened to their conversation. After a while, he saw that Fairy Kinkan was about to leave, so he followed her out of Yaokai. "Sister Fairy, if someone invites me to their clan later, if I refuse, will it be too offensive?" Musian looked at the graceful Fairy Kinkan not far away, and suddenly asked with worry. "Everything is up to you. If you don't want to accept the rejection, I'm still here if anything happens." Fairy Kinkan smiled. "Sister Fairy is so good to me," Musian sighed sincerely. Fairy Kinkan's eyes, as bright and clear as a cold pond, glanced at Musian slightly and said, "Everything is cause and effect. In the final analysis, it is because you helped me first that this cause and effect exists. If Musian hadn't gone to the pilgrimage hall and brought her out of that cave, and even traveled thousands of miles to the restricted area to get the reincarnation water after that, she wouldn't be where she is now. It is my honor to serve the fairy." Musian looked respectful, but there was deep admiration in his eyes when he looked at her. The two chatted for a while, and seeing the palace in front of him, Musian's mind moved slightly, and he wanted to follow the fairy in the green skirt into the room. However, after crossing the threshold and entering the room, the fairy in the green skirt chuckled, and then quickly restored her previous fairy posture. "Go back and concentrate on meditation, and see you tomorrow." Musian now has no drops in the natural furnace, and going into the room with her will make him have bad thoughts. In this way, the natural furnace will take a long time to fully recover, so it is better for him to stay alone. As the fairy in the green skirt finished speaking, a breeze blew and pushed Musian out of the room lightly. Musian stood in the wind, messy, and could only see the beautiful back of the elegant woman. The breeze blew over her skirt, vaguely highlighting the fascinating curve of her hips. Then, the door closed. This woman got off the bed and turned her face against me. Musian stood at the door of the room in shock. It was not until a long time later that he came to his senses and shook his head and sighed. "Well, after the Tiansheng furnace is restored, I will give her a little stick education. Next time, let her taste what it feels like to be kept on suspense." When Musian thought of this, he suddenly sent a message to the fairy in the green skirt in the room. "By the way, among the people who came to the Yaokai Holy Land today, there seems to be a demon cultivator. Do you know the other party's identity? The fairy in the green skirt responded from the room, and seemed to be a little interested. Musian pondered for a moment and also sent a message. This guess may not be correct, but from the past to now, I have only felt this kind of charm in one person. Musian sent a message. But there was no sound in the room for a long time. Go and meditate first, Fairy Kinkin said softly. If nothing unexpected happens, she will come to see you soon. Musian said no more, left the room, found a guest room near the palace, and concentrated on meditation and cultivation. That night, the spiritual energy between the Qing Emperor's palace and the outside world formed a rainbow-like bridge, which was continuously injected into Musian's body, and it lasted for a long time. The next morning, Musian opened his eyes from meditation, feeling the spiritual energy filled in the natural furnace, and couldn't help but shook his head and sighed secretly. Looking at this, it will take at least 2 days for the spiritual energy to fully recover. The Fairy Kinkin looked charming, but probably no one would have thought that she could absorb all the spiritual energy of his natural furnace in less than one night. This ability is even more powerful than her vines. When Musian thought of this, he closed his eyes and entered the state of meditation and cultivation again. He had to restore the spiritual energy of the natural furnace as soon as possible before he could serve Fairy Kinkin again. Similarly, his 8 Desolations dream map can also be evolved through the physique of the green skirt fairy. Musian just closed his eyes, and suddenly seemed to feel something. He looked up at the closed door and said, "Sister Mengru, why are you here?" The door opened, and it was Wei Mengru who came into view. "Why are you here? Did you miss me?" Musian smiled. Wei Mengru glanced at her young master's sunny smile and said lightly, "Someone asked me to help, saying that they want to see you for something important." In the bedroom where Musian was, except for the Green Emperor and the Saint of Yaokai, only the maid Wei Mengru could set foot. "But who specifically entrusted Sister Mengru to see me?" Musian hesitated and said, "Is he someone I know?" "It stands to reason that he shouldn't know anyone in Yaokai. From the looks of it, it should be that he doesn't know the other person, but the other person knows him." The apple of the Wang family's eye in Dongzhou, Wang Ying. Wei Mengru opened her mouth to clear up Musian's doubts. "It's her," Musian pondered for a moment and said, "Bring her over." Looking at it like this, my guess must be correct. After Musian waited in the room for a while, he met Wang Ying, the daughter of the Wang family whom he had met yesterday. Wang Ying, who was lazy and charming with a delicate face, licked her voluptuous red lips and said with a smile, "Mr. Mu, it's really hard to meet you." While she was speaking, she walked into the house with a quick step, and sat with her slender jade-like legs crossed, her charming eyes staring at Musian tenderly, with an indescribable temptation. "Miss Wang Ying, why did you come to see me?" Musian decided to get straight to the point, staring closely at the beauty in the red dress in front of him. "Why are Mr. Mu so anxious?" "This is not sentimental at all." Wang Yingmei smiled, with a pair of charming, autumn-like eyes that looked at Musian tenderly. "Miss Wang Ying, you know me, right?" Musian poured a cup of tea for the daughter of the Wang family, then raised his head and stared at her. Those seductive eyes were extremely charming. Just looking at her for the first time made people feel like their souls had been taken away by her. "No," Musian quickly shook his head gently, stared at Wang Ying's flawless and beautiful face, and said, "Should I call you the queen?" The smile on Wang Ying's face faded a little, and she lifted up the small and exquisite red embroidered shoes on her jade feet. Her green fingertips caressed her snow-white and smooth thighs, and finally crossed the table and touched Musian's face, and said with a charming smile, "It's not a good thing to be too smart, isn't it? If I were your enemy, even if you were in King Di's palace now, you would still be silenced." Musian smiled helplessly, "Because I'm not sure about the queen's identity, I specially added a layer of protection." "I'm sorry." Wang Ying, or in other words, the queen of the demon realm attached to Wang Ying couldn't help but narrowed her eyes, staring at Musian with a pair of seductive red eyes, her red lips slightly opened, with a trace of doubt in her eyes. At this moment, a clear, sweet, heavenly voice sounded lightly in the room. "If there's anything that has to sneak in, can't we talk about it together?" Wang Ying glanced at her side slightly. In the room, a fairy in a green skirt with a beautiful appearance suddenly appeared in the field of vision. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 218. What is the Demon Queen doing in Dongzhou? Musian looked at the woman in front of him, his mind full of doubts. After all, she was a demon emperor, and she was safe and sound in Bezhu, but she came to Dongzhou at this sensitive time, and even seemed to be attached to a young girl. It was absolutely impossible for Musian to not care. This was also the reason why he had reminded the fairy Kinkan before, asking her to appear at the right time to see what the demon queen wanted to do. With the appearance of the fairy Kinkan, Wang Ying, or the demon queen attached to Wang Ying, raised her eyes slightly and looked at the fairy Kinkan with a little surprise. "I didn't expect that you can still detect my existence even though your breath is so weak now." Her words were full of sincere admiration. In order to avoid being noticed, she blocked the secrets of heaven, and this time it was only a wisp of spiritual consciousness that came, and it was even attached to a female cultivator in the refining spirit realm. Under such circumstances, the Green Emperor actually noticed it at the first time, which was really surprising. "I can detect the aura on you even if you block the secrets of heaven." Fairy Kinkan looked at Wang Ying and said, "The queen of the demon world came to my palace quietly. Is there something important?" Wang Ying smiled faintly and said softly, "I just want to chat with my subordinates and reminisce about the past. It has nothing to do with you." "Subordinates?" Fairy Kinkan couldn't help but glance at Musian and said, "He is not a demon cultivator, so how could he be your subordinate?" Wang Ying pursed her charming red lips, raised her eyelids slightly, and said charmingly, "I met this little cultivator by chance in the past, and left the mark of the demon world on him. Since then, he has been used by me. But don't worry, I don't know his love affair or what he does on weekdays. I won't interfere. I left a mark on him at the beginning just because I wanted to." Wang Ying changed her tone and continued, "However, it is beyond my expectation that the dignified Qing Emperor would practice dual cultivation of spiritual energy and the person of the Tianzhen Glüting." The Kinkan fairy's cold jade-like face showed a faint smile for the first time. She stared at Wang Ying quietly and said, "I am not just for spiritual energy." She paused and continued, "It seems that your body can do very little. You only know that he is a Tianzhen Glüting, but you don't know how many things are hidden in his Tianzhen Glüting. The current body of the Queen of the Demon Realm is not her original body. She came to Dongzhou this time and only used a spiritual consciousness to temporarily attach herself to Wang Ying, the daughter of the Wang family. A cultivator in the realm of refining spirits, if he does not have close contact with Musian, naturally will not be able to realize that his Tianzhen Glüting is no longer what it used to be." "Oh." Wang Ying narrowed her eyes slightly, and seemed to have some interest in her eyes, and looked at Musian for a few times. From the outside, the boy's appearance is indeed quite good. Even the queen of the demon realm, who is used to seeing all kinds of opposite sexes, rarely sees such a good appearance. But that's all, at least from the outside, that's all. Musian is now a first-grade soul refiner, and his talent is not bad, but it is naturally unrealistic to enter the eyes of the queen of the demon realm. But what the Green Emperor said just now makes people a little concerned. Speaking of which, it is indeed a bit strange. In theory, the physique of a natural furnace cauldron will not evolve, but if so, it doesn't make sense why the Green Emperor would practice dual cultivation with a little cultivator. If the realm of a natural furnace cauldron is the realm of soul refinement, then his cauldron will be the realm of returning to the void. But even if the Tiansheng furnace cauldron is dual cultivated once, the spiritual energy it can provide is limited, Even if it lasts for a whole day, it is impossible to completely absorb the spiritual energy of the Tiansheng furnace cauldron. But the spiritual energy filled in the body of the Green Emperor at this moment is much more than that of a normal return to Void Realm cultivator. Logically speaking, even if they practiced dual cultivation day and night until daytime, the Green Emperor should not have such spiritual energy. From this, we can draw a conclusion: Musian's Tiansheng furnace cauldron has been strengthened more than once. Being stared at by the Demon Queen so directly, even Musian felt a little scalp numb. He coughed lightly and interrupted at the right time, saying, "The Queen came to Dongzhou specially this time and even came to see me. Is there something important? This woman is the most dangerous one that Musian has come into contact with from the past to the present, at least that's the feeling Musian gave on the surface. Among the powerful people in the Hedao realm that Musian has come into contact with, the sect leader Shang Yanfei is mysterious and unknown. Miss Linglong is simple-minded. As long as you can feed her, she will not disturb you. Fairy Kinkan is more of a cool type. She is proficient in playing the guhan and her voice is lingering and pleasant to the ear. Therefore, just her voice made Musian very excited when they were in bed last night. Although Fairy Kinkan seems to be very kind and gentle when talking to others on weekdays, she is a very difficult person to control. Although he took the initiative at the beginning last night, after the vines controlled him, Fairy Kinkan took the dominant position. As for the charming queen of the demon world, she is the most dangerous existence that Musian has ever met. Just by meeting her eyes, he will be uncontrollably attracted to her. You know, someone like Musian who has been wandering among flowers all year round and has a very high self-cultivation can control himself from looking at a woman if he really wants to. But only the queen of the demon realm will make him feel his heartbeat speed up at the first sight of her. This is caused by the charm ability of the queen of the demon realm. Just by attaching to a girl, she has the charm to fascinate everyone. If her real body comes, I am afraid that she will kneel down and pay homage uncontrollably at the first sight. While Musian was sighing in his heart, he secretly observed the queen of the demon realm and waited for her to speak. I came to you for something. Under Musian's gaze, the queen of the demon realm slowly said, this matter is related to the first generation of the demon king of the demon realm. If there is anything I need to do, just say it, Musian said. He had already guessed something in his heart, but he still planned to wait for the queen of the demon realm to explain it herself. After the first generation of demon kings was suppressed, I cleaned up Bizhu and wiped out the remnants of the previous demon world. Although there are still remnants of demon cultivators from the previous generation in the demon world, they are few and far between and cannot cause any big waves. When the demon queen said this, she looked at Musian with a faint gaze. However, Bizhu has been cleaned up, but there are still many in Dongzhou. Musian's eyes moved slightly, as if he knew something, and said, what did the seventh seed say? When he went to Tianqian city before, he used the power of the spirit dragon to scare away the remnants of demon cultivators from the previous generation. After escaping from Tianqian city, that person was suppressed by Ying Guhuan and Yan Ruyu and captured by the law enforcement hall of Lianji sect. It seems that the people in the law enforcement hall should have obtained a lot of information from the demon cultivator. The demon queen nodded silently. More than 1,000 years have passed, and there are still remnants of demon cultivators from the past lingering, and even let them run to Dongzhou. This is not like your style. The pleasant voice of the green skirt fairy came faintly. Most of the remnants of demon cultivators who stayed in Bizhu have been eliminated. As for the affairs of Dongzhou, it has nothing to do with me, the queen of the demon realm said lightly. If they were in Bizhu, none of them would be able to escape. But even the queen of the demon realm could not reach out to Dongzhou. It seems that the queen of the demon realm came to Dongzhou this time to completely eliminate the first generation of demon emperors, so as not to have more dreams at night. Musian listened to the two people's conversation and came to this conclusion in his heart. At this time, the queen of the demon realm continued, this time the Tiandan phoenix tree bears fruit, you must pay attention to protecting the Tiandan phoenix fruit. Once the Tiandan Phoenix tree bears fruit, it will be the best time for the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators to secretly act. Without the reincarnation water, relying only on the Tiandan Phoenix fruit, could the first generation of demon emperors also be able to reshape their bodies? Musian asked. The original body of the first generation demon king is quite special. Even without the reincarnation water, he can still maintain his own form for a period of time, the green skirt fairy said. As if knowing Musian's doubts, the green skirt fairy spoke again. His original body is the 9-life sky phoenix. If he practices to the extreme, he can achieve an immortal body. Once he obtains the sky pill phoenix fruit, he can use it to temporarily condense the cauldron and regain his life. Musian looked thoughtful. Then, she suddenly asked, isn't it safe enough to have the queen and senior kingdy guarding the Tiandan phoenix tree? The queen of the demon realm touched the table with her green jade fingers, and she said calmly, my spiritual consciousness attached to this girl will soon disappear, and I can't help you. As for her. The queen of the demon realm looked at the fairy in green skirt, and saw her current state at a glance, and said, if I remember correctly, the Tiandan phoenix fruit will not produce several at a time, but only one every few days. With the current state of kingdy, after getting the Tiandan phoenix fruit, she will probably need to refine the Tiandan phoenix fruit and condense the cauldron. Is the fairy so weak now? Musian looked at the fairy in green skirt with some surprise. The green skirt wrapped her sexy and soft figure, and her exquisite and flawless profile was even more beautiful. Because of the nourishment last night, her skin even showed a healthy light red. From the appearance alone, it can't be seen that the fairy in green skirt is weak at all. However, the queen of the demon realm would not lie about such a thing. Fairy Kinkan, I am afraid that her current condition is indeed very bad. If so, while Fairy Kinkan is refining the Tiandan phoenix fruit, she really needs to think of a way to protect the remaining Tiandan phoenix fruit. After all, if the Tiandan phoenix fruit is obtained by the first generation of the demon emperor, there will probably be a great chaos in Dongzhou. You know, even if it is an extremely weak Hedao realm expert, the counterattack before death will definitely be very terrifying. The queen of the demon realm spoke again about the previous generation of demon cultivators, and Musian listened carefully. According to speculation, these remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators are likely to be hiding in the ancient family, and some may have become elders among them, and are now lurking in the Holy King city. If so, their purpose, naturally, is to come for the Tiandan phoenix fruit. If the Green Emperor is indeed in a bad state now, he will indeed have to strengthen the guard of the Tiandan phoenix tree in the future. After they chatted for a while, Musian suddenly found that there seemed to be a wisp of purple smoke rising from Wang Ying's body. Then, the girl in the red skirt who had just been chatting and laughing with them fainted on the table. Obviously, the last wisp of spiritual consciousness of the queen of the demon realm attached to Wang Ying had completely disappeared at this moment. The room fell into a brief silence. Wei Mengru stepped forward and helped Wang Ying up, saying, I'll take her back. The maid always understands the atmosphere very well and will not disturb the young master, but will guard him silently and secretly. After Musian watched Wei Mengru leave, his eyes quickly fell on Fairy Kinkan. Then, his eyes narrowed slightly and he saw Fairy Kinkan's smooth and soft snow-white hands, which seemed to have a slightly translucent feeling. With a dreamlike and unreal feeling. Musian grabbed her hand, which was so cold that even if he held it in his hand, it seemed like it would disappear at any moment. If it weren't for the queen of the demon realm, he wouldn't have realized it at all. After all, Fairy Kinkan's previous actions were too strong, and it was hard for people to believe that a queen would disappear between heaven and earth. But now it seems that Fairy Kinkan's condition is indeed very bad. His current aura only maintains the body of Fairy Kinkan, but if she does not condense the cauldron, she will still be in danger of disappearing. The fairy in the green skirt stared at him, her lips outlined a faint arc, and said, There is no need to worry about me. I told you before, the reincarnation water can condense a body for me, and this body can last for at least a month. For the above period, just take the heavenly pill phoenix fruit during this period." She paused and continued, "And I have survived for a long time. Even if I pass away in the future, I can treat it as birth, old age, illness, and death, and there is no need to worry about it." Musian frowned slightly, held the slender hand of the fairy in the green skirt, stared at her beautiful face, and said, "How can anyone be so indifferent to life and death? If you can live forever, who wouldn't want to?" Fairy Kinkin smiled lightly and said, "It's good to live forever, but when you see your best friends around you, they are no longer able to withstand the passage of time, and you are finally left alone." She raised her head and stared at Musian and said, "After that, maybe you will have a different view. It's enough to grasp it now. At least you still have me here, right?" Musian put a hand on the slender waist of the fairy in the green skirt. Even through the light material, she could feel the warmth of her skin. Soft and creamy. He wasn't sure what the Empress was thinking. Maybe it was just as she said, because she was used to seeing her friends pass away, so she didn't have much nostalgia for the human world. What he wants to do is simple: let Fairy Kinkin feel loved. The relationship between them may not be that deep yet, but feelings can be cultivated slowly in the future. The sadness that Fairy Kinkin felt just now disappeared under the influence of Musian's movements. Musian passed one hand across Fairy Kinkin's waist and moved it downwards. At the same time, he slowly came forward and wanted to kiss her. Labialis. Fairy Kinkin subconsciously glanced at the door of the room, then turned to look at Musian and said, "Wait a minute, close the door dash." Before she finished speaking, Musian had already occupied her red lips, and then sent a message, "It's okay, this is your bedroom, no one will come." He put one hand on the ribbon around Fairy Kinkin's waist and glanced at her subconsciously again. It seems that because of his action, the beautiful eyes of the fairy in the green skirt stared at him closely. There seemed to be a trace of smoke in the eyes, which was touching, and the face with a faint blush looked even more mature and attractive. "You can also close your eyes and leave the rest to me," Musian said softly. Time passed silently, and before you knew it, 10 days had passed. During this period, Musian once went to the Holy King City. Firstly, he wanted to see if the spiritual consciousness of the Queen of the Demon Realm was still in Wang Ying. Secondly, he also wanted to try his luck to see if he could detect the demon cultivator from the previous generation. The remnants of many elders of the Huanggu family took this opportunity to invite Musian to go to their families with them, saying that they would introduce their young ladies to Musian. Musian did not refuse these invitations, but he also did not accept them. To put it bluntly, his reply was, "Definitely next time." As 2 days passed, a slight vibration was felt in a certain area in Yaokai. A phoenix cry came from the Tiandan phoenix tree area. On this day, the heavenly Dan phoenix tree bore fruit, and its fire illuminated the Yaokai. Under the sky, the sound of phoenixes echoed throughout the sky. Many monks came forward and came outside the Yaokai Holy Land to watch this spectacular scene. The heavenly pill phoenix tree in the Yaokai Holy Land is famous far and wide in Dongzhou and can only be seen once in a long time. What's more, this time is even more special. After all, this time the heavenly pill phoenix fruit will help Qing Emperor condense the cauldron and return to the realm of harmony. At this moment, there are many monks not far outside the Yaokai Holy Land, looking at the sky that was burned into red by the heavenly pill phoenix tree. "Look, Emperor Qing has come out," at this time, someone suddenly said. Everyone looked around and saw the figure of the fairy in the green skirt. She was wearing a fluttering green skirt, and her body was shrouded in a layer of silvery light like moonlight, giving people a distant and beautiful hazy feeling. The fairy in the green skirt seemed to be stepping in the void, walking slowly towards the fire phoenix in mid-air. Her green skirt was fluttering with the fierce wind of fire, but her jade feet were still white under the firelight, and her jade toes were crystal clear, seemingly unstained by the world. The Qing emperor is really graceful and amazing. A casual cultivator looked at the woman in midair with longing eyes and sighed softly. Even if the empress of the Hedeo realm is weak, she is still beyond the reach of us. This trip to the Holy King city is not in vain. Another voice came from the side, and the longing in his eyes was hidden in his eyes. But it is deep love. If the Green Emperor really relies on the heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit to return to the Dao this time, we can be regarded as witnessing history. That being said, in order to condense the cauldron, spiritual energy is needed. I wonder how the Green Emperor will obtain spiritual energy. Someone also spoke with a less optimistic attitude. Since she is the Green Emperor, there should be some secret method that can temporarily obtain spiritual energy. That day, after she returned to Yaokai, she quickly suppressed the 3 land immortals. She must have used some secret method to obtain spiritual energy, right? Someone next to her speculated. Many people believe that the Green Emperor is a fairy of a generation, with peerless beauty, and there is nothing she can't do. Even without a cauldron, she can use some secret methods to forcibly transfer spiritual energy for her own use. The Green Emperor does have this secret method. But in the final analysis, this kind of spiritual energy transferred from heaven and earth can only be used as a means of attack, and cannot be used for one's own use. Speaking of which, why is there a male cultivator following the Green Emperor? At this moment, someone suddenly pointed at the young man not far from the green skirt fairy and couldn't help asking. At this moment, there was a young man following the green skirt fairy. He was dignified, wearing a black and gold robe, and had a good face. His appearance alone could attract the attention of many girls present. But you have to know that the one standing there now is one of the few female emperors in the world. Just being good looking is not enough to stay by the side of the female emperor. For a while, a slight discussion came from outside Yaokai. If I remember correctly, this person should be Musian, right? A cultivator couldn't help but ask. These days in the Holy King city, the name Musian is often mentioned. In order to prevent more people from competing for the natural furnace cauldron and not to offend the Green Emperor, several ancient families did not expose Musian's physique. But some perceptive people still noticed the abnormality. At this critical moment when the Green Emperor returns, how could the Yaokai Holy Land let an outsider in? Therefore, some people speculate that the Green Emperor was most likely rescued by Musian. This can be seen from the attitudes of the major ancient families in the Holy King city towards Musian in recent days. However, why he walked with the Green Emperor at this time is still a bit puzzling. It's really strange. Logically, if the Green Emperor wants to condense the cauldron, he needs to refine the heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit and then concentrate on meditation and cultivation. Why does he bring Musian with him at this time? Condensing the cauldron is a long process and cannot be disturbed. It is indeed a bit unreasonable to bring someone with him in this situation. When everyone was discussing secretly, a voice suddenly sounded lightly, speaking of which, the Green Emperor needs spiritual energy to condense the cauldron, and this spiritual energy seems to be only available from the outside world. She may have a secret method to extract the spiritual energy between heaven and earth for her own use, but without the cauldron, she cannot take the spiritual energy into her body, let alone condense the cauldron. What do you mean, fellow deist? Someone next to him couldn't help but ask. The spiritual energy from the outside world may not be of much use to the condensation of the cauldron by the Green Emperor later. But if it is the spiritual energy obtained from dual cultivation. The originally noisy chatter around him suddenly became silent with this speculation, and countless eyes stared at the young man in the air, seeming a little dazed. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 219. Musian could vaguely hear some of the conversation outside Yaokai. If he suddenly put his arm around the waist of the green skirt fairy and shouted to her, "Wife, look, there are so many people watching us." I don't know if he would be beaten to death on the spot after saying that. Of course, Muzian would not do such a thing if he wanted to. He looked at the green skirt fairy not far ahead. She raised her fingertips. In the air, the fire phoenix evolved from the Tiandan phoenix fruit, shrank quietly and finally stopped at her fingertips. Most of these divine objects have a trace of spiritual consciousness. Although they have no wisdom, they will instinctively attack the pickers or make a move to escape. And this Tiandan phoenix fruit never made a move to escape from beginning to end, because it instinctively surrendered to the Green Emperor. "What are you thinking about?" The green skirt fairy seemed to notice Muzian's gaze, glanced at him slightly, and asked softly. Muzian came back to his senses and shook his head, saying, "It's okay, it's just a little strange. During this period, I didn't notice any traces of demon cultivators in the ancient family. In theory, as long as he is a demon cultivator, the demon mark on his body should react. But the demon marks of the several ancient families he contacted, including the elders of some forces in Dongzhou, did not react at all. The fairy Kinkan once told him that the demon mark is not divided into past or present. As long as he is a demon cultivator, the demon mark on his body will react more or less. This is the permission given to him by the Queen of the Demon Realm when she descended this time. As for the reason, it's easy to imagine that the Queen of the Demon Realm is far away in Bizhu and it's not convenient for her to take action, but she can make it convenient for Muzian to temporarily detect which demon cultivators exist in Yaokai and even in Shenhuang City. But the investigation results show that there are no traders in either Shenhuang City or Yaokai Holy Land. This is very strange. If there are no remnants of demon cultivators in these two places, doesn't it mean that they don't even intend to seize the heavenly pill phoenix fruit? Of course, it is also possible that they are not hiding in the Holy King City, but hiding somewhere in the wild. It doesn't matter. After refining the heavenly pill phoenix fruit this time, it doesn't matter whether they have any small moves, Fairy Kinkan said lightly. Her tone was calm, full of self-confidence. This is no wonder. Even a terrifying existence like the first generation of demon emperors could be suppressed, let alone some remnants under the first generation of demon emperors. Muzian nodded gently, then glanced at the Tiandan phoenix fruit in the hands of the fairy in the green skirt, and said, "As long as this thing is refined, can the cauldron be condensed?" The fairy in the green skirt nodded slightly at first, and then, her delicate and perfect face seemed to be stained with a faint blush. She glanced at him and said, "In addition, it is also necessary." It seemed a little difficult to speak. She was silent for a long time, and then she said softly, "In addition, your spiritual energy is needed, so I may have to trouble you again." There seemed to be a hint of shyness in the heavenly voice that was not there in the past. "You are polite when you say this, can I still refuse you?" Muzian showed a solemn look and took the soft hand of the fairy in the green skirt. "Fairy, you are polite. It is my honor to condense the cauldron for you. It is not a trouble. According to the previous speculation of the Green Emperor, it will take at least 7 days for the remaining Tiandan phoenix trees to bear fruit. During this period, the elders of Yaokai Holy Land have activated the Yaokai formation, and they can rely on the formation to resist any invasion from outside. As a last resort, they will directly destroy the Tiandan phoenix tree so that it can no longer bear fruit. Of course, doing so will cause considerable damage to the Tiandan phoenix tree, and it may not bear fruit again for nearly 100 years. The green skirt fairy nodded silently, stared at Muzian, and said, "Take the spiritual energy nearby into your body, and then leave with me. When the Tiandan phoenix tree bears fruit, the spiritual energy nearby will be affected by it, and it will have some nirvana Taoism. If you take this opportunity to absorb the spiritual energy and comprehend it, you may be able to get something good from it." This is also the reason why the green skirt fairy brought Muzian to this place. Muzian nodded slightly. His natural furnace has been in a semi-empty state for some time, so it doesn't take long to absorb the spiritual energy from the outside world. However, he did not absorb all the spiritual energy affected by the Tiandan phoenix tree into the Tiansheng furnace, but absorbed half of it, and did not continue to absorb the rest. Even if it is just a trace of the spiritual energy of the Tiandan phoenix tree, it is possible to perceive the trace of Taoism in it and get more spiritual energy, which is of no help to perception. There are so many people watching below, and Musion does not intend to take away all the opportunities. Let's go, I'll take you to the ancestral land. The fairy in the green skirt floated in the air and spoke after waiting for an incense stick of time. The ancestral land of Yaokai is where the fairy in the green skirt intends to condense the furnace this time, and it is also the place where she and Musion will practice dual cultivation in the future. If the fairy body of the fairy in the green skirt was only condensed with the help of the reincarnation water before, this time, after adding the nirvana of the Tiandan phoenix fruit, it is her real body in the past. As for whether there is a difference between the two, Musion has not experienced it yet, so he is not very clear. Musion clasped his fists and bowed to the crowd not far below, and then left with the green skirt fairy under the gaze of the elders in Yaokai and even the queen mother of Yaokai. This young friend Mu is very good at being a human being. He did not completely absorb the Dao rhyme brought by the Tiandan phoenix tree. A cultivator in the crowd couldn't help but speak. This trace of spiritual energy may also allow us to comprehend the Dao rhyme of the Tiandan phoenix tree. A cultivator next to him quickly raised his hand, took away a small part of the spiritual energy, and looked at Musion, who was flying in a certain direction. He felt a lot more favorable towards his actions. There is no loss for him. He is just doing a favor. Some people sneered in secret and disdained Musion's actions. Even if he gets more spiritual energy brought by the Tiandan phoenix tree, the Dao rhyme he can comprehend is the same, right? The man continued. Some people looked at the man who spoke. He was a young man with a pale face. He had thin lips but was handsome. He wore a luxurious robe, which added a bit of noble temperament. The second young master of Xiantian Pavilion in Dongzhou, Shifei. The people present were well-known figures in various places in Dongzhou, so they immediately recognized the identity of this person. Although the status of Xiantian Pavilion in Dongzhou is not as big as the Forbidden Area, it is not much different from Yaokai. Of course, if the Qing Emperor really condensed the cauldron this time, the status of Yaokai Holy Land would not be comparable to other forces. Unexpectedly, even the people of Xiantian Pavilion came. Many people read some special information from the young man in front of them. The disciples of Xiantian Pavilion rarely left their area in the past, and they were very far away from Yaokai Holy Land. Even if they rushed to travel desperately, it would probably take more than 5 days. It seems that the various forces in Dongzhou are secretly paying attention to the rebirth of the Green Emperor. Originally, some people wondered why some major forces in the Holy King City did not gather completely, but now it seems that some forces in Dongzhou are probably also paying attention secretly, but they have never shown up. This time, the Green Emperor was able to reunite in the cauldron, and all the major forces in Dongzhou were very concerned. Because this is a historic moment, there may not be another female emperor in the Hedao realm in the future. If the Green Emperor reunites in the cauldron this time, won't Musion have any worries in the future? Suddenly someone said with a sigh, and there was a bit of unconcealed jealousy in his eyes when he looked at Musion leaving. Once the Green Emperor reunites in the cauldron, there will be another female emperor in the world, with the protection of such a strong man, who dares to attack Musion. The premise is that the Green Emperor can condense the cauldron. Musion may be chosen by the Green Emperor to help her condense the cauldron, but is the spiritual energy of the refining God realm really enough? A questioning voice came from the side. The elders of several ancient families in the crowd looked at each other tacitly, and then silently moved their eyes away. These people did not know that Musion was indeed in the refining God realm, but his other cauldron was not in the refining God realm. While these people were still talking about this, more and more clouds in the sky were burned red by the Tiandan phoenix tree. The discussion between the cultivators ended, and many people flew up to the sky with swords to absorb spiritual energy. The spiritual energy affected by the Tiandan phoenix tree these days is all good stuff. As much as you can get is as much as you can. After returning, you can slowly comprehend it. If you can get something from it, this trip to the Yaokai Holy Land is worth it. The Queen Mother of Yaokai stood in the Holy Land, looking at the cultivators absorbing spiritual energy in the air, and did not stop them. Her mind seemed to have already left with the Green Emperor. This time, the Green Emperor decided to condense the cauldron in the Yaokai ancestral land. On the one hand, it was to prevent the thunder tribulation from affecting other people in Yaokai. On the other hand, the ancestral artifact of the Yaokai Holy Land was hidden in the ancestral land, and the formation there was set up by the Green Emperor himself. Even if someone really had any bad intentions, they would be wiped out by the formation. 5 Yaokai elders went to the ancestral land this time, and each of them was in the Return to Void realm. They will work together to open the formation to prevent anyone from entering the ancestral land. And that's all they can do. As for whether the cauldron can be condensed and returned to the unity of the Tao, on the one hand, it depends on the Green Emperor himself, and on the other hand, it depends on whether Musian's Tianzhengluding is enough to continuously give the Green Skirt Fairy spiritual energy. Whether the Tianzhengluding can withstand the test of the Green Emperor depends on this time. If the Green Emperor really reunites in the cauldron, Musian's value will be magnified again. By then, those ancient families who are secretly observing will probably try every means to cheat Musian back to their families no matter how much benefit they pay. The ancestral land of Yaoqi. This ancestral land was once created by the Green Emperor himself, and every Yaoqi saint was selected here. It can be said that the ancestral land has an extremely sacred status in the hearts of the disciples in Yaoqi. The areas owned by the major forces in Dongzhou are very vast, and the Yaoqi is naturally the same. The ancestral land is located in the east of Yaoqi, where the mountains and forests are lush and green, and occasionally unknown creatures flap their wings and fly over, with the aroma of medicine. And in the depths of the mountains and forests, there is a hall. Is this the ancestral land of Yaoqi? Musian looked up at the ancient and sacred hall in front of him, and couldn't help but respect him in his heart. On both sides of the hall, he seemed to be vaguely aware that someone was peeking here secretly. He looked up and saw a female elder he had seen during this time. Musian nodded slightly at them, then glanced at the fairy in the green skirt beside him, and said, "When does the fairy plan to start condensing the cauldron?" "No rush." Fairy Kinkin raised her head and stared into the sky. Her green eyes were so deep for the first time, and she said calmly, "Don't worry, it will take a while. Has the secret been deduced and the best time to condense the cauldron has been determined?" Musian understood. "By the way, what's your name?" Musian suddenly asked as he followed Fairy Kinkin into the hall. She glanced at Musian, with a faint smile in her eyes, and said softly, "I'll tell you next time." Every name likes to titillate people, and this fairy really likes to tease others, and is a bit shady, Musian thought to himself. Let's whet her appetite and give her a taste of what torture means. When Musian was thinking of this, Fairy Kinkin had already entered the hall. After walking along the corridor for a while, I saw a bathing pool. The water surface is sparkling and clear, exuding a refreshing medicinal fragrance. This is the preparation that Yaokai Holy Land made early this time in order to help Fairy Kinkin gather the cauldron. The elixirs prepared in this bath would be of no value to the outside world. Yaoqi spent half of its financial resources this time. Musian's eyes fell on Fairy Kinkin, and his mind gradually became more active. I don't know whether she noticed the boy's eyes or something, but the fairy's crystal earlobe seemed a little hot, but she acted calmly under Musian's gaze and walked lightly to the bathtub, covering her plump and straight breasts with one hand. He stood on tiptoe slightly and touched the water surface. Musian walked behind Fairy Kinkin and stared at her back. The body wrapped in the green skirt just outlines the perfect and graceful sexy curves. Her exquisite and small embroidered shoes have long faded away, and her flawless jade toes, like jade carvings, touch the water, making ripples layer by layer. Musian's eyes fell on the water again. Being born with a spiritual body, he was naturally able to detect how rich the elixir in the bath was. It feels like the time spent on giving me a bath is a bit wasted, Musian sighed inwardly. Then his eyes returned to the fairy in the green skirt. But that's right, this bathtub is not prepared for him, he just can take a sip of soup. But the highlight is not the soup, but the fact that you can eat meat. I still have a few bottles of reincarnation water, let's put them into it together. Musian took out the reincarnation water from the ring and poured it into the bath together. A person can only take the reincarnation water once, and it will be of no use if he takes more. The reincarnation pond had given him the reincarnation water many times before due to his physical condition, but for Musian, it was of little significance. However, it is still of great help to the cauldron that condenses fairy kinkan. After all, the spiritual energy in the reincarnation water is extremely rich, no less than some top elixirs. After doing all this, he looked at the Empress standing in front of the bath. The thin clothes seemed to be unable to cover up the full charm on her chest. The mist on her body was hazy, and a small piece of snow-white slender hair could be vaguely seen in the haze. Calf. Museinen's mind moved slightly, and his eyes were a little more burning. He took 2 steps forward and placed a hand on the plump waist of Fairy Kinkan. Fairy Kinkan's delicate body trembled slightly, she glanced at Musian's mischievous palm, gently pushed it away, and said, "First, wait a minute, I need to refine the heavenly pill phoenix fruit first." There seemed to be a bit more shame in that voice than usual. "Good." Musian grinned and showed a bright smile. Then, he saw a green lotus blooming quietly in front of the bathing pool. The fairy in the green skirt stepped on the bathing pool and walked to the green lotus as if walking on flat ground. At this time, a phoenix cry echoed through the hall. The heavenly pill phoenix fruit in Fairy Kinkan's hand turned into a flaming phoenix and soared in the hall. Afterwards, she meditated and practiced in the green lotus to refine the heavenly pill phoenix fruit. Musian was very patient, so he sat aside and waited, slowly admiring the fairy's appearance and her slightly blushing face. He's not in a hurry, since everyone is here now, can she still run away? Boom. Nearly half an hour later, a thunderous sound echoed through the sky. Many people in the outside world know that this is the Qing Emperor's thunder disaster. The cauldron has not yet been condensed, but it has already affected the way of heaven, and the thunder calamity is already about to happen. On this day, countless gazes from monks from all over Dongzhou were focused on the direction of the Yaokai Holy Land. Rumors about the suspected close relationship between Musian and Qing Emperor also spread from the restricted area to the Lianji sect, and then spread throughout Dongzhou. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 220. Yaokai, the Ancestral Land. In the hall, the fairy in the green skirt leaned in the medicinal bath, the water surface covered her chest, and only a pair of snow-white shoulders could be vaguely seen floating on the water. And above the bath, a clear and pleasant phoenix cry resounded, and the Tiandan phoenix fruit was like a real phoenix hovering in the air. Then, it quietly turned into a wisp of red smoke and entered the body of the fairy in the green skirt. It is rumored that the Tiandan phoenix fruit has the effect of nirvana. As long as the spiritual consciousness is still there, even if the incomplete cauldron or even the cauldron completely disappears, it can be reunited. The fairy in the green skirt closed her eyes slightly and quietly refined the Tiandan phoenix fruit. The white mist on the bath was hazy, and her body was vaguely visible. Her long hair was tied up like a waterfall, and the strands of hair hung down in front of her jade neck. She was less cold, but more lazy and worldly. Although the jade neck was covered by the bath and the mist, one could still feel the greatness of the human heart. Although I have seen it more than once before, the fairy in green skirt is indeed unfathomable. Musian sighed in his heart. He was very patient. After watching the danhuang fruit being completely refined by the fairy in green skirt, he slowly walked behind the fairy in green skirt. "Is the refining finished?" Musian asked her from behind. As if she had noticed the slightly burning gaze behind her, the fairy in green skirt nodded a little uncomfortably and said softly in the mist. Seeing this, Musian stepped forward and said, "I will help you condense the cauldron. By the way, take this opportunity to avenge the revenge that the fairy had kept him waiting before." When Musian thought of this, he was about to step down from the bath. However, just after taking 2 steps forward, he suddenly felt a slightly familiar touch on his wrist. From the touch, it should be something like a rope. Musian looked down and saw that a thin green vine beside him had silently climbed up to his wrist, and then quietly lifted him in front of the fairy in green skirt. Musian. Fairy. After a short silence, Musian's eyes fell on the fairy in green skirt. Why is she so anxious? Last time, she used this vine after she had done it once, but this time, he was controlled before he even started. The fairy in green skirt covered her chest with one hand and stood up slowly. Didn't I say this before? I can detect whether a person is lying or even malicious from others. At the first time she spoke softly, and her voice alone made people feel good about her. Looking at the boy brought to her by the vines, Fairy Kinkin smiled softly and said, "Although I know that your malice just now is not real, at this point in time, there is no time to play slowly. So, let me do it." Musian. Listening to the pleasant voice coming from his ears, Musian suddenly realized something very serious. It seems that it is not up to him to decide whether to tease the Empress. If the vines are used, he seems to have no better way for the time being. But forget it. Looking at the blush on Fairy Kinkin's pretty face, and her figure as she slowly approached him, Musian decided to give up thinking. He didn't care, anyway, it was not a loss. An hour later, Musian put one hand around Fairy Kinkin's slender waist, silently enjoying the warmth. "Fairy, do you need more?" Musian asked. Fairy Kinkin shook her head gently and said modestly, "Considering your health, you can take it slow first, don't rush." For an hour, the Tianjin Gluding repeatedly absorbed the spiritual energy in the bath, and then repeatedly handed it to Fairy Kinkin. Next, Fairy Kinkin only needs to use the Dinglu that was temporarily condensed by the Tiandan phoenix fruit to reunite her real Dinglu, and Musian's mission will be completed. Musian smiled and said, "I don't care, I'm still young and can bear it." When he said this, his attention was quickly attracted by her appearance. Her hair, which was originally tied up, was a little messy at this time, and her hair hung on her delicate oval face, with a high nose and a small red lips. At first glance, she actually had a little more charm that she had never had in the past, and a charm that was a combination of purity and desire. Aware of Musian's eyes, Fairy Kinkin looked ahead without looking at him, as if she wanted to maintain the indifference of the past and the fairy posture when she was holding a shelf on weekdays. Musian looked at her cold attitude and felt like teasing her. He could not help but move closer and kiss the green skirt fairy's cheek. Her skin was white and delicate, exuding a faint fragrance. The green skirt fairy's body trembled slightly, and an ambiguous atmosphere filled the air between the two of them. Her cheeks gradually became hot, and her eyes were filled with shame, confusion, and the coldness she tried to maintain, and the gradually blurred eyes. She turned her head slightly to look at Musian and whispered, "If you continue like this, I will no longer consider your physical condition." Musian said in his heart, "What else can you do to me?" He showed a gentle and brilliant smile. "There is no need to rest anymore, fairy, you don't have to consider my physical condition." He did not worry and continued to kiss her. The green skirt fairy's eyes flickered slightly, staring at Musian's eyes. There was a touch of emotional water in her eyes. The next morning, Musian leaned in front of the bath and looked up at the ceiling of the hall, seeming to be thinking about the meaning of a person's birth in this world. Fairy Kinkin put a cool plain hand on the back of his hand. Her beautiful face was very close at hand, and she kissed his face, with a hint of tenderness in her eyes that she had never seen before. "What's wrong?" Fairy Kinkin asked as if she noticed Musian's gaze. "It feels like this doesn't look like you." Musian was a little surprised, thinking that the fairy in the green skirt might have been swapped. She was obviously reserved yesterday, but her subsequent behavior was a bit wrong, and she took too much initiative. "While the cauldron is being condensed, my personality will indeed be affected to some extent, but don't worry about it. Once the cauldron is completely condensed, it will return to its original posture." The fairy in the green skirt had a faint smile in her eyes, which was a little charming. "What is the principle of this? During the period of condensing the cauldron, will it affect my personality? Are you sure you're not bullying me because I'm inexperienced and naive? Are you going to die?" Fairy Kinkin's clear and melodious voice lingered in her ears, mixed with a faint fragrance, refreshing her heart. "Ha, the fairy was joking, nothing is impossible." Musian was naturally dissatisfied and responded immediately. It's rare to see such a proactive side of Fairy Kinkin, so naturally he won't be polite. Late at night. Outside the mountain forest, the moonlight shines silvery, and occasionally you can hear the sound of wild beasts scurrying into the jungle. Fairy, why don't you meditate for a while and let me slow down?" Musian said as a last resort. Fairy Kinkin slowly shook her head and said softly, "Time is pressing. I must gather the cauldron as soon as possible to eliminate all troubles. I must not be lazy." Musian. "Well, it doesn't matter. Such a charming fairy takes the initiative to seek his love and affection. Even if she is a little tired, what can she do?" Musian gritted his teeth, not afraid at all, and vowed to use his body as a god to compete with others. Late at night. Yaokai Holy Land. The Queen Mother of Yaokai is sitting in front of the throne, quietly feeling the intimidating power brought about by the activation of the formation. Today, the Danhuang tree has just produced its first fruit. Although it has been taken by Qing Emperor, it cannot be taken lightly. The rest of the fruits cannot be taken away by the remnants of the previous generation of demon cultivators. As early as yesterday, when Fairy Kinkin and Musian left, the Yaokai Holy Land had already activated the formation. Once a demon cultivator enters, the formation will directly crush the opponent. At this time, a female disciple from Yaokai walked over and said, "The Queen Mother, the Deputy Master of Xiantian Pavilion, and the Master of Zihong Pavilion are outside asking for an audience." Xiantian Pavilion and Zihong Pavilion. The Queen Mother of Yaokai pondered for a moment, nodded and said, "Invite them in." Among Dongzhou, Yaokai Holy Land also has a close relationship with some forces. Xiantian Pavilion and Zihong Pavilion are two of the major forces. In the past, the three major forces have had a lot of cooperation. The two major pavilions will come at this time, probably because they have something important to discuss. Other side. Time passed silently, and before I knew it, another day had passed. Musian pushed open the old and heavy iron door of the hall and walked out of the hall slowly. He held his waist with one hand, raised his head, and looked at the dazzling sunshine. As if he had regained a new lease of life, he slowly breathed a sigh of relief, and his tense body relaxed. Warm reminder: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. In the past, he felt that it would not be a problem for him to suppress a strong man in the Hedeo realm with the body of a god. But now it seems, I may have to practice some more. As Musian left the hall, the iron door of the hall slowly closed on its own. Then, a formation quietly opened, covering everything in the hall. This is the formation of the ancestral land, and it was also built by Emperor Qing himself. In less than half a month, she will gather her true cauldron and return to the realm of harmony. Outside the main hall, several elders spotted Musian and looked at him with strange looks in their eyes. Musian came here the morning before yesterday, and then left this morning. 2 full days have passed. Coupled with his current posture, it's difficult not to make people suspicious of anything. Musian didn't care about these strange looks. He just arched his hands towards the elders, calmed his thoughts slightly, then took out 3 essence resurrection pills, swallowed them, and left the ancestral land with his sword. He was still a little concerned about the previous generation of demon cultivators and wanted to investigate further. According to the Queen of the Demon Realm, as long as there is a demon cultivator nearby, the demon realm mark in his body will react. If the demon cultivators are not in the city but gather in some mountains and forests outside the city, as long as the number is sufficient, the demon world mark will still be able to react. However, he had been inside and outside the city in the past 10 days, and he had not noticed any trace of the previous demon cultivator. This also means that these remnants of the demon cultivators under the old demon either did not come to the Yaokai Holy Land, or they came very rarely and never visited the Holy King City. In addition, they hid their own aura, so the demon world mark did not respond. No matter which possibility it is, it needs further investigation. Of course, before that, he still needs to let his body slow down. I never expected that Fairy Kinkan, who usually looks cold, would be more enthusiastic than me when she got into the mood, Mu Jian sighed inwardly. He didn't really believe what the green skirt fairy said, that after condensing the cauldron, one's personality would change a little. Isn't this just coaxing a child? Of course, if some people blindly worshipped the Green Emperor, they might really believe her words. But Musian obviously didn't believe it. Wei Mengru followed Musian silently, without disturbing his thoughts. This maid was always so reassuring, and even after so long, she still despised her young master, which made Musian a little helpless. After leaving the Yaoqi ancestral land, Musian flew under the lush green mountains and forests, flying towards the Yaoqi. After nearly half an hour, he suddenly felt a slight burning sensation in his chest. The mark of the demon world reacted. Musian's eyes moved slightly, and he slowed down his flying speed a little and looked around. He didn't detect any breath of demon cultivators. He pondered for a moment, and said calmly to the empty forest, "How long are you going to hide?" After the words fell, there was still no response. But Musian was also very patient, half hanging in front of the forest. Not speaking, pretending to be a master. Master Mu is really quite perceptive. I have completely restricted my own breath, but you still noticed it? After a while, a shadow twisted, and then a masked, hideous-looking man appeared silently in the field of vision. 5th level of soul refining? Musian saw the realm of this person at a glance. He practiced with the Fairy Kinkan 2 days ago, and after taking a medicinal bath, he also reached the 2nd level of soul refining. In addition, because of his natural spiritual body, he could roughly judge the level of some soul refining cultivators. Demon cultivator, Musian asked. The man sneered, "Master Mu, aren't you asking knowingly? You are a demon cultivator under the 1st generation of Demon King," Musian said lightly. The man grinned and said, "Yes, we are here for the great revival plan of the Demon Emperor. Master Mu, you promised to bring the Tiandan Phoenix fruit to the Demon Emperor, but now you watch the Green Emperor take the Tiandan Phoenix fruit away. Isn't it a bit wrong?" Musian shook his head and smiled faintly. "I have sworn to the Demon Emperor that I will get the Tiandan Phoenix fruit and the reincarnation water for him." Do you think I dare to break my oath? The man was silent. Swearing to the sky, in Juzhu, not many people dare to do this. Because, if you fail to fulfill your promise in the end, you will be struck by lightning. In addition, if you step into a new level in the future, you may even be entangled by the inner demon because of the failure to fulfill this promise, which will seriously affect your future cultivation. Besides, you should have seen how the Green Emperor obtained the Tiandan Phoenix fruit at that time. In that case, how dare I ask her to hand over the Tiandan Phoenix fruit obediently? Musian continued to speak. After a moment of silence, the man said, "Can you get the second Tiandan Phoenix fruit?" "I'll do my best," Musian said. The man sneered and said, "In that case, I hope Master Mu can fulfill his promise as soon as possible." "How should I contact you then?" Musian asked. "Just send it to the pilgrimage temple, and don't contact us," the man said, and was about to leave. At this time, Musian suddenly asked, "Don't you have any other benefits for me?" At the end, he stared at the man's back with a bit of greed in his eyes. The man paused as he was about to leave, sneered, and said, "After the matter is done, I will give you 3 top-quality women with slave marks engraved on them. Is that enough?" "This man knows me very well and knows that I am an LSP, Musian showed a happy look on his face, looked at the man, and said, "Are you serious?" "Of course," the man sneered, "but the premise is that you can get the Tiandan Phoenix fruit for us. Now that the formation of the Yaoqi Holy Land is open, it is almost impossible to step into it from the outside to obtain the Tiandan Phoenix fruit, but you seem to be deeply trusted by Yaoqi. Whether you can fulfill your promise and be appreciated by the Demon Emperor depends on you." After saying that, he turned into black smoke and disappeared from sight. Musian silently withdrew his sight and flew away on his sword. After a while, Wei Mengru's cold voice came to his ears. "They should know that you gave Qingdi spiritual energy and helped her, so why didn't they do anything to you?" The rumors that Musian was suspected of practicing dual cultivation with Qingdi were known to people outside, and the previous generation of demon cultivators hiding in the dark could not have been unaware of it. Just now, there was a previous generation of demon cultivators hiding on the way Musian left, which means that they should have guessed something. But from beginning to end, the previous generation of demon cultivators never did anything to Musian, but just explained some things and left. Somewhat strange. They don't trust me, but they trust the oath I made in front of the Demon Emperor that day, because the oath was witnessed by the heavenly Dao and cannot be changed. Musian turned his head to look at Wei Mengru, and said slowly, "I am just a part of their plan. It would be best if I can get the Tiandan Phoenix fruit. If I can't, they will also act on their own. It's just that they still have a glimmer of hope in me." "Does that mean they plan to seize the Tiandan Phoenix fruit themselves?" Wei Mengru raised her eyebrows slightly, and took the opportunity to slap Musian's move to step behind her and fly with her on the sword, and continued. "Now that the Yaoqi formation has been activated, coupled with the deterrence of the Green Emperor, there are also demon cultivators from previous generations who can break the formation." Musian couldn't help but fall into silence after hearing this. This is a very strange thing. His demon world mark had no reaction in the Holy King City and the Yaoqi Holy Land during this period, until just now it reacted to a demon cultivator from previous generations. This also means that most of the subordinates of the first generation of demon kings are not near the Yaoqi Holy Land. The Tiandan Phoenix fruit is extremely important to the first generation of demon kings, but this time the first generation of demon kings only sent a few subordinates to seize the Tiandan Phoenix fruit. This probably can't even break the Yaoqi formation, right? Unless, the formation is broken from the inside. Musian was suddenly stunned. Inside. He whispered to himself. What's wrong? The yellow skirt beauty noticed the abnormality of her young master and couldn't help asking. Musian slowly turned his head to look at Wei Mengru, expressionless. The mark of the demon world on my body has no reaction. which also means that there is indeed no trace of the previous generation of demon cultivators in Saint King City. Maybe, there are not many remnants of the demon cultivators of the first generation of demon kings in Dongzhou. But has anyone stipulated that only demon cultivators are enemies of Dongzhou? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 221. No one has ever stipulated that our enemies are only the demon cultivators of the previous generation, right? Under Wei Mengru's gaze, Musian slowly said, some benefits are enough to drive people crazy. It may not be that only the demon cultivators are the enemy. Perhaps from the beginning, the demon cultivators are inside. It sounds a bit fantasy, but if the benefits are in front of you, it may not really make people unmoved. For example, an 8th grade elixir. Since the first generation demon king was able to give a soul-nourishing pill to Musian that day, even if he took out a second one now, Musian would not be surprised. It may not be a soul-nourishing pill, it may also be other elixirs. You know, the 8th grade elixir must be made from emperor-level medicinal materials and contain a trace of Taorim. And this Taorim may be an opportunity to return to the void and step into the realm of enlightenment. Even if it is just a little bit of opportunity, people can ignore the consequences. As for worrying that the first generation demon king will betray and not give the elixir in the future, it is impossible. After all, once you swear an oath to the heavenly Dao, it cannot be changed. Although it is just a guess, it is better to be careful. Musian pondered for a moment, found an open space nearby, and then took out a paper crane from the ring. This is one of Lan Murian's magic weapons, and its fixed location is the back mountain of Lianji Peak. At present, it is not convenient for him to return to Lianji sect, but he can use this letter to let his senior sister ask Yang Guhuan about some things about the previous generation of demon cultivators on his behalf. After writing the letter, Musian released the paper crane, and only after he stared at the paper crane wrapped in fairy spirit disappearing from his sight did he retract his gaze. Let's go back to Yaokai first. This matter is of great importance. If it is really as he guessed, perhaps directly destroying the Tiandan phoenix tree is the safest way. Although this method is undoubtedly to let Yaokai cut off its own wings. He didn't know the value of the Tiandan phoenix tree, but through the admiration and feelings of the fairies in Yaokai Holy Land for it during this period, we can know what kind of status the Tiandan phoenix tree has in the hearts of the disciples of Yaokai Holy Land. No matter what, now we can only take one step at a time. The Queen Mother of Yaokai is a well-educated and beautiful woman. Even if she disagrees with destroying the Tiandan phoenix tree, she should give other solutions. Yaokai Holy Land, back garden. This place is close to the pond. Lotus flowers are blooming in the pond. There is a pavilion nearby. A dignified and elegant woman is sitting at an octagonal table made of white jade. She is not wearing makeup, her hair is simply tied up, her appearance is graceful and charming, although her appearance is dignified, but she gives people an infinite sense of distance. Not far from the saint of Yaokai is the second young master of Xiantian Pavilion, Shifei. The Queen Mother of Yaokai is standing not far from the pond, chatting with the two pavilion masters of the ancient family. From the outside, the age of this Yaoqi saint and the fairy in green skirt seems to be similar, but compared with the Empress, this Yaoqi saint is less mysterious, and the ravines on her chest are not as unfathomable as those of the fairy in green skirt. Other than that, there is not much difference. The Yaoqi saints of all generations are gifted geniuses, and in Yao Yu's generation, it has reached the extreme. Her natural Taoist physique is more outstanding than that of the saints of all previous generations. Shifei looked at several elders in the distance and sighed, Fairy Yao Yu is talented. She has already reached the 7th level of soul refining at a young age. It must be a matter of time before she returns to the realm of emptiness. The Yaoqi saint smiled faintly and said, Mr. She seems to have reached the 4th level of soul refining now. With your talent, it should not be difficult for you to return to the realm of soul refining in the future. Her voice is always crisp and pleasant, and her light white long skirt sets off her almost perfect figure, with a soft body and sparkling eyes. Shifei seemed to be quite pleased with what Yao Qi Saint said. He showed a faint smile on his face, but quickly restrained it, as if he wanted to show the demeanor of a noble man who was neither arrogant nor impatient. This scene was naturally seen by Yao Qi Saint, but she always kept a gentle smile on her face, as if she didn't notice it. Yao Qi Saint had seen too many noble men like Shifei. He looked like a gentleman, gentle and elegant, with a very good family background, and no worries about any cultivation resources, so he was a little arrogant. In front of her, they would restrain such arrogance and want to show their humble side. Almost all noble men have a similar mentality. Yao Qi Saint thought of another person for no reason. Musian seemed to be a noble man with a good family background, but she had never seen him do anything arrogant. Sometimes when Musian saw her, he would sneak a peek at her chest and thighs from time to time. Yao Qi Saint was very sensitive to other people's gazes, but she never mentioned it to Musian. But in general, although they were both noblemen, Musian made people feel much more comfortable when chatting with him, and there was no awkwardness. As for the reason, she couldn't explain it clearly. It seemed that Musian knew how to find topics to make girls happy. Shifei looked at the beautiful profile of Yao Qi Saint and smiled. The fairy is so charming, there must be many people pursuing her. Do you have any thoughts about those people? Yao Qi Saint smiled reservedly. Everything depends on fate. I am not very interested in love. Shifei smiled and was about to speak again. At this time, a young man stepped into the backyard door. He was dressed in a black robe with gold threads, and his temperament was extraordinary. Next to him was a beautiful woman in a yellow skirt. Although she concealed her own aura, she still couldn't hide her beautiful and refined face. At this time, many people were chatting in the backyard, and as Musian stepped into the yaokai, many people looked at her. This time, the Green Emperor returned to the yaokai and condensed the cauldron. Even if she wanted to keep a low profile, she couldn't do it. The news that the Green Emperor returned to the yaokai naturally spread all over Dongzhou. And the name Musian was also mentioned by many people. As for the reason, it was related to the rumors that spread 2 days ago. At first, the news that spread was that the Green Emperor needed spiritual energy to condense the cauldron. Later, it was spread that the Green Emperor and Musian practiced together. Until today, the news became that the Green Emperor and the little cultivator in the refining spirit realm were in a Taoist relationship. This news was a bit absurd, and most people didn't actually believe it. However, some ancient families who knew Musian's physique thought it was not impossible. At least it is not impossible for Musian and Kingdi to practice dual cultivation. Under the gaze of everyone, Musian stepped into the backyard, looked around, and muttered in his heart, so many people came to Yaokai Holy Land today. It seems that there are not only people from Yaokai Holy Land. When Musian just thought of this, he suddenly keenly sensed 2 slightly dangerous auras. He took the opportunity to look at the 2 strange middle-aged men not far from the Queen Mother of Yaokai, and then his heart could not help but shudder. He could not sense the aura of the other party at all, which meant that these 2 people should be in the Return to Void realm. One of the men was dressed in a green robe and had an extraordinary bearing. Next to him was a woman in a black dress, with eyeshadow painted on, a peach-like face, slightly pursed red lips, and a pair of beautiful eyes staring at him affectionately. Musian stepped forward calmly and clasped his fists, saying, "Junior Musian greets the Queen Mother and the 2 seniors." The Queen Mother of Yaokai nodded slightly with a gentle smile, and the man in green robe beside her smiled and said, "Is this young friend Musian? As the rumors say, he is a rare genius." Musian clasped his hands and looked humble. At this time, the Queen Mother of Yaokai smiled at the 2 of them and said, "I will consider the conditions you proposed again and give you an answer in the next 2 days." The two pavilion masters clasped their fists, and the pavilion master of Zihong Pavilion smiled gently and said, "We have cooperated more than once in the past. I believe that my character can still be trusted. I hope the Queen Mother can consider it again." After that, the two of them left with the elders who came with them this time. Just now, when the black-dressed beauty passed by Musian, she looked at him tenderly and said with a smile, "If you are free in the next 2 days, you can come to the Wuxiang Tower in Shenhuang City to find me. I am still interested in your deeds." This person looks like a girl of 17 or 18 years old. I didn't expect that she is an elder. It is true that the world of cultivation cannot just look at people's appearance. Musian arched his hands. "If I am free in the future, I will visit her." The black-dressed beauty raised her lips slightly, showed him a seductive smile, and then walked away. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, her waist twisted in a charming way, and her hips wrapped in the dress shook out a thrilling arc. Although she is a female elder, she looks more like a sexy beauty. Although not as good-looking as the fairy in the green skirt and Ruoxi, she is also a first-class figure. Musian commented in his heart. But, he is not that kind of casual person. From beginning to end, Musian's eyes were calm, without any charm. If it was normal, maybe he would have some thoughts, but now. Let alone this female elder, even if the fairy in green skirt stood in front of him, he didn't feel anything for the time being. The fairy in green skirt is just like that, bored. That said, after a few days when Musian recovers, the fairy in green skirt hooks her finger, and Musian will probably go to bed and accompany her. Musian was watching everyone leave, when a cold voice suddenly came to his ear. "I hope I can have a chance to learn from you later. I hope you won't let me down." Looking at this aspect, it should be a face-slapping role that was originally used as a stepping stone for Yayu. Musian silently evaluated in his heart and chose to turn a blind eye. Since Yayu's protagonist status has been continuously weakened, Yayu's protagonist weight has become weaker and weaker, and now it can almost be said that there is no great sense of existence. However, Musian is still not the protagonist until now. Although Musian didn't care, he was still a little speechless. This fairy world must be a bit sick. It stands to reason that he weakened Yayu's status as the protagonist, so shouldn't he improve his status as the protagonist? In the end, all the good things went to Bai Ruoxi, Ya Lingxian and the others. What's going on? If the role positioning displayed on this interface pops up a title like Female Protagonist or Golden Finger one day, Musian wouldn't be too surprised. But in fact, he doesn't care. Anyway, the stronger the girl around him becomes, the easier his future will be. The beautiful harem life is already beckoning. "Friend Mu, is there any problem with Senior Kingdi?" At this time, a gentle voice sounded softly in his ear, and it also pulled Musian back to reality from the fantasy of the future Crystal Palace. Musian calmed down a little, looked back at the gentle eyes of the beautiful woman, nodded and said, "Senior Kingdi has enough spiritual energy, and it is condensing in the cauldron. The retreat will end in a while." According to Kingdi, it does not take a long time to condense the cauldron, but it may take some effort to replenish the spiritual energy in the cauldron. Relying on the spiritual energy from the outside world alone is not enough to fully restore her cauldron. If she wants to keep the cauldron full, she must either absorb the vitality of the entire Dongzhou for her own use, or take it slowly. Or, get spiritual energy from Musian every now and then in the future. The spiritual energy given to others by the Tianzhen Gluding is 4 or 5 times that of the outside world. If you use the Tianzhen Gluding, you can quickly refill the cauldron. Of course, for an existence like Kingdi, it is probably not that easy to fully refill. This is a big project that requires day and night hard work. By the way, Queen Mother, this junior has another thing to report this time, Musian suddenly said. Under the suspicious eyes of Queen Mother Yao Qi, Musian used the method of voice transmission this time. there is indeed no trace of the previous generation of demon cultivators in the Holy King City this time, but this does not mean that the subordinates of the first generation of demon kings have really given up on seizing the Tiandan phoenix fruit. The Queen Mother of Yaokai's eyes moved slightly, and said, "What do you mean, my friend? There are no demon cultivators in the Holy King City, but it does not mean that there are no enemies. The enemies may also be our own people," Musian said. The Queen Mother of Yaoqi is a very intelligent beauty, thinking about what Musian just said. After a moment, her red lips opened slightly, and even the words of the voice transmission were subconsciously lowered. "You mean, someone in the ancient family of Dongzhou secretly colluded with demon cultivators? But why? Colluding with demon cultivators is a capital crime, and will be despised by everyone in Dongzhou, and will be nailed to the pillar of shame in history. The ancient family has a high status in Dongzhou, and it is not worth taking this risk for a little profit. Of course, they will only agree if we offer them benefits that will make them excited." Musian paused. "Of course, this is just a guess, but it is best not to let any ancient family enter the Yaokai Holy Land in the near future. Even if the Tiandan phoenix tree has not yet borne fruit for the second time, we should be careful." The Queen Mother of Yaokai nodded slightly. Afterwards, she seemed to remember something, and suddenly froze for a moment, her eyes full of doubts. Has the Queen Mother thought of anything? Musian also noticed the abnormality of the Queen Mother of Yaokai, and couldn't help but ask in a voice transmission. The two pavilion masters just now were planning to exchange the Tiandan phoenix fruit with Yaokai, and the benefits they gave were nearly half of their family's resources. The Queen Mother of Yaokai suddenly said. "Half of the resources doesn't sound very good. But you have to know that this is an ancient family with a deep foundation. Half of the resources given by the ancient family is an extremely terrifying astronomical figure, which is enough for the Yaokai Holy Land to use these resources to forcibly produce more than to return to the Void Realm cultivators. It is also because of this that the Queen Mother of Yaokai did not refuse just now, but replied that she needed to think about it again." But Musian's words now made the ruler of Yaokai extremely confused. What exactly do Zihong Pavilion and Xiantian Pavilion need Tiandan phoenix fruit for? Why do they hesitate to exchange so many resources? According to them, it is because the old monster in the clan is on the verge of death and needs the help of Tiandan phoenix fruit to be reborn. What if, the one who needs this Tiandan phoenix fruit is not the old monster in their family, but the first generation of Demon King? The eyes of the Queen Mother of Yaokai flashed slightly, and she made a decision immediately. Let Lian Jisek send people to the Holy Land of Yaokai to guard the Tiandan phoenix fruit together. At present, the ancient family cannot be trusted because they don't know who the traitor is. The only one who can be trusted unconditionally is Lian Jisek. The Queen Mother of Yaokai just thought of this. At this time, a maid suddenly came hurriedly and said in a hurry, "Queen Mother, Yaokai is blocked by a mysterious barrier, and the people in the clan can't leave Yaokai." Something is not right. Musian's heart sank. The look in the eyes of the Queen Mother of Yaoqi also changed, and she immediately raised her hands and made a gesture. A ray of green spiritual energy quickly rushed to the sky above the Yaoqi Holy Land, but in almost an instant, it was shattered by the barrier that had been set up in the sky. Then, a cold and gloomy voice slowly sounded in the Yaoqi Holy Land. "Sometimes, being too smart is not a good thing." The Queen Mother of Yaoqi suddenly looked up and saw a man in a green robe walking slowly, and behind him was the pavilion master of Zihong Pavilion who had just left. "What do you mean, the two pavilion masters?" The Queen Mother of Yaokai's tone was full of anger, but she felt a huge pressure in her heart. The other party would turn against her so openly, and I'm afraid they had already made some corresponding preparations. Musian's guess could be said to be very timely, but he didn't expect the enemy to be so decisive and didn't give them any buffer time. Not far away, a ripple appeared in the eyes of the Saint of Yaoqi for the first time. This sudden change was unexpected by no one, and it caught everyone off guard. "I don't have any other intentions. I just want the Tiandan Phoenix fruit, but I'm worried that the Queen Mother will want to destroy the tree later, so I came to stop her. Fu Yuan, the head of Xiantian Pavilion, smiled lightly with his hands behind his back. If the Tiandan Phoenix tree is destroyed, our promise will be difficult to fulfill, and we will encounter thunder tribulation later. The man in green robe beside him also laughed loudly. What do you want the heavenly Dan Phoenix fruit for? Yao Qi Queen Mother stared at the two of them. At the same time, she secretly raised her fingertips and tried to send out the signal from Yao Qi again. The black-dressed woman next to her showed a charming smile and said faintly, "Don't try. Yao Kai's formation is indeed unbreakable, but it doesn't mean that the inside is equally strong." The signal released again was fruitless, which made Yao Qi Queen Mother's heart heavier, and her eyes stared at the people in front of her. At this moment, even idiots knew what their purpose was. "Are you planning to betray Dongzhou?" Yao Qi Queen Mother said in a deep voice. "The word betrayal has nothing to do with us." Fu Yuan smiled nonchalantly. The demon cultivators from the demon world blocked Yao Qi and attacked a group of Yao Qi elders. The Queen Mother of Yao Qi had an affair with Musian and colluded with the demon cultivators, working together from the inside and outside. He looked at Musian gently and smiled. After the news was exposed, the Queen Mother of Yao Qi was defeated by the two pavilion masters, and Musian committed suicide out of fear of crime. "Are you satisfied with this arrangement?"